Hello friends. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Your interaction not only supports the channel's growth, but also helps these stories reach more people. Thank you all for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. Do you have any idea how you feel when dispatch calls you about something that shouldn't even exist? Not the usual domestic incident or traffic check, but a call of the kind where even the address alone turns your stomach. That's exactly what happened when we received the call about the Stillwater Industrial Complex. This place had been closed since 1987, shut down due to asbestos and chemical contamination, surrounded by barbed wire and plastered with warning signs stating that trespassing was a criminal offense. No one was supposed to be there. No one should have wanted to be there. But at 10:30 p.m. on a humid Tuesday night in August, someone reported seeing flashlights moving through the third-floor windows. My name is Officer Ethan Miller, 15 years on patrol, and I've responded to plenty of calls in places I'd rather not be. Crack houses, abandoned buildings where squatters set up camp, you name it. But Stillwater was different. The city had tried to demolish it 3 times over the years, and each time, something went wrong. Equipment failures, permit issues, worker injuries that seemed too coincidental. The place had a reputation, and not the kind you laugh about over coffee. I remember my training officer, Sergeant Patricia Harrison, telling me about Stillwater during my rookie year. She'd been on the force for 30 years and had responded to the original evacuation call in 1987. "Kid," she'd said, lighting her 3rd cigarette of the shift, "there are places in this city that want to stay forgotten. Stillwater's one of them. If you ever get a call there, bring backup. Hell, bring an army if you can." At the time, I thought she was just trying to spook the new guy. 7 years later, after she'd retired to Florida, I found myself wishing I could call her for advice. Marcus Rivera was my partner that night. Still green, with only 3 years under his belt, but eager to prove himself. When dispatch gave us the address, I saw his face change in the patrol car's dashboard light. Even he knew about Stillwater. The stories had been passed down through the department like ghost stories around a campfire. Officers who'd gone in alone and come out changed. K-9 units that refused to enter the building. Radios that would pick up transmissions from channels that didn't exist. "Could be urban explorers," Marcus suggested, trying to sound casual as we drove through the empty industrial district. The streetlights had been disconnected years ago to discourage people from coming here at night. Our headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating rusted shipping containers and overgrown lots. "You know how those YouTubers love abandoned places." "Maybe," I said, but something felt wrong. The initial report hadn't come from a concerned citizen or a security patrol. It had come from Tyler Bennett, the overnight security guard at the warehouse complex next door. Tyler was 55, former military, not the type to spook easily or imagine things. When dispatch played back his call for us, his voice had been steady but urgent. "There are lights in Stillwater. 3rd floor, moving systematically room to room. That's not kids messing around." I'd actually met Tyler once before, during a false alarm at his warehouse about 6 months prior. He'd been professional, alert, the kind of guard who actually did his rounds instead of sleeping in the office. He'd mentioned then that he kept an eye on Stillwater too, said sometimes he saw things that didn't add up. Delivery trucks that came at 3 a.m. and left empty. People in suits surveying the building at odd hours, always from a distance, never actually entering. I'd filed it away as paranoia at the time. Now, I wondered if I should have paid more attention. The drive to Stillwater took us through the heart of the old industrial district, past the abandoned Kruger Metalworks plant and the collapsed remains of the Riverside Chemical Facility. Each had its own dark history: industrial accidents, environmental disasters, worker deaths that were settled out of court and buried in paperwork. But none had the reputation of Stillwater. None had been so thoroughly erased from public record while still standing there, massive and undeniable, like a monument to corporate sins. As we turned onto Industrial Boulevard, our police radio crackled with an unusual amount of static. Marcus adjusted the frequency, but the interference only got worse. Then, for just a moment, we heard something else. A voice, distorted and barely audible, saying what sounded like, "Sector 7 clear, proceeding to extraction point." But we were on Channel 3, the main patrol frequency. There was no Sector 7 in our district, no extraction points. Marcus and I exchanged glances but said nothing. Some things you don't put in official reports. The main gate was exactly as it should have been when we arrived, locked, with no signs of forced entry. The chain was intact, the padlock secure. I ran my flashlight along the fence line while Marcus called it in. "Control, this is Unit 23. We're 1097 at Stillwater Industrial. Gate appears secure, checking perimeter." The dispatcher's response came through heavy with static. "Copy Unit 23. Be advised, we're showing unusual interference in your area. Backup units are experiencing navigation issues. GPS system showing incorrect locations." That should have been our first real warning. The department had upgraded to digital GPS tracking 2 years ago, state-of-the-art equipment that never failed. But Stillwater had a way of making technology unreliable. The old-timers said it was the chemicals in the soil, creating some kind of electromagnetic field. The younger officers joked it was haunted. Nobody really laughed at those jokes. The fence stretched for nearly a quarter mile around the complex, but it didn't take long to find the breach. On the north side, partially hidden behind a cluster of overgrown sumac bushes, someone had cut a neat hole. The edges were clean, made with proper wire cutters, not the jagged mess you'd expect from kids with stolen tools. Professional. But there was something else, something that made my skin crawl. The grass around the hole was dead in a perfect circle, about 3 feet in diameter. Not just dead, blackened, as if burned, but without any signs of actual fire. And in the center of that dead circle, the cut fence gleamed like new metal, despite the rest of the fence being rusted and weathered. It was as if time moved differently in that one spot. Marcus whistled low. That's recent. No rust on the cut edges. He knelt down, careful not to touch the blackened grass. But look at this. The ground's been like this for a while. See how the dead grass has started to decompose at the edges. This burn pattern, or whatever it is, it's at least a week old. But the fence was cut tonight. He was right. I crouched down, examining the ground more carefully. Fresh footprints in the mud, maybe 3 or 4 sets heading in, none coming out. But underneath those fresh prints were older ones, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, creating a worn path that had been used repeatedly over time. Someone had been coming here regularly, but they'd always repaired the fence afterward. Tonight was different. Tonight, they'd left it open. My hand moved instinctively to my service weapon, checking it was secure in its holster. The weight of it was reassuring, but I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever we were walking into, a gun, might not be much help. "We should call for backup," Marcus said. And he wasn't wrong. Protocol was clear about entering condemned structures, especially ones with known chemical hazards. But something about those systematic lights Tyler had described nagged at me. If someone was in trouble in there, if someone needed help, Waiting for backup and hazmat gear could mean the difference between a rescue and a recovery. And there was something else. Something I hadn't told Marcus. 3 weeks ago, we'd had a missing persons report. A journalism student named Sarah Whitman who'd been investigating old industrial accidents for her thesis. Her roommate said she'd been obsessed with Stillwater, had dozens of Freedom of Information requests pending, had even tried to interview former employees. She'd disappeared after telling her roommate she'd gotten a lead, someone willing to talk. We'd found her car abandoned 2 miles from here, but no other trace. The case had been turned over to the detective division, but they'd hit dead ends. If there was even a chance she was in there. We go in, quick assessment only, I decided. If we see anything suspicious, we pull back and wait for support. Marcus nodded, though I could see his reluctance. We squeezed through the fence opening, our flashlights creating dancing shadows across the crumbling parking lot. The main building loomed above us, 5 stories of broken windows and water-stained concrete. But it was the details that disturbed me most. The way no birds nested in the eaves, no graffiti marked the walls despite this being prime territory for taggers. No homeless had set up camp despite the shelter it offered. Even the desperate wouldn't come here. The loading dock doors had been welded shut years ago, but there was a personnel entrance on the east side. The door hung open, its lock mechanism completely removed. Not broken, not forced, surgically removed with power tools. The cuts were so precise they looked almost medical, and fresh metal shavings on the ground caught our flashlight beams like glitter. Above the door, barely visible under decades of grime, a sign read, "Authorized personnel only. Level 5, clearance required." Level 5 for a factory entrance seemed excessive. Most government facilities only went up to level 3. The smell hit us immediately as we stepped inside. Not just the expected mustiness of an abandoned building, but something chemical and sharp that made my eyes water even through the basic dust masks we'd put on. Underneath it was something else. Something organic and wrong, like meat left to rot in a sealed container. Marcus gagged, and I didn't blame him. The reception area was a disaster zone of fallen ceiling tiles and scattered papers, yellowed with age. Our footsteps echoed in the silence, every sound amplified by the empty corridors. A desk sat in the middle of the room, and unlike everything else, it had been recently cleared. A modern laptop sat closed on its surface, its power light blinking green. A sticky note on top read, "For those who seek truth. Password. Remember 1987. Don't touch it, I told Marcus, though the temptation was strong. Could be evidence, could be a trap. We moved deeper into the building, following the main corridor. Office doors stood open on both sides, their name plates still readable. Quality control, shipping logistics, human resources. But there were other doors, ones with nameplates that didn't belong in a factory. Biological research, behavioral modification, asset development. The last one had been scratched out, but I could still make out the original text underneath. Test subject processing. Police. Anyone in here needs to identify themselves immediately. My voice bounced off the walls, coming back distorted and strange, as if the building itself was mocking us. No response. The elevator shaft stood open, its doors long gone, cables hanging like dead vines. We took the stairs, testing each step. The concrete was solid enough, though water damage had left abstract patterns of mold and mineral deposits on the walls. On the second-floor landing, we found the first sign of recent activity. A candy bar wrapper, still glossy, not faded by time, but it was the brand that caught my attention. Meal Ready, a military MRE component. Not something you'd find in a vending machine. "Someone's definitely been here," Marcus whispered. and I noticed he'd already unsnapped his holster. The second floor was a maze of smaller offices and what looked like medical examination rooms. Hospital beds, rusted but still recognizable, were lined up against one wall. Leather restraints hung from the rails. Charts on the walls showed human anatomy but with modifications. Additional organs that didn't exist. Nervous system pathways that made no sense. Skeletal structures that looked almost human but wrong in ways I couldn't quite define. In one room, we found a filing cabinet that had been recently opened. The lock was broken, and files were scattered across the floor. Most were water-damaged beyond reading, but one caught my eye. It was a personnel file for someone named Michael Brennan, hired in 1985 as a test coordinator. His photo showed a smiling man in his 30s. The last entry was from October 1987. Subject exhibited unexpected resistance to Protocol 7. Recommended for advanced trials. Family told he died in chemical leak. Marcus picked up another file. Jesus, listen to this. Subject 23B, formerly Janet Rodriguez, custodial staff. Prolonged exposure to compound X7 has resulted in beneficial mutations. Recommend harvest of genetic material before termination. This is dated 2 weeks before the plant shut down. The third-floor hallway stretched out before us, a tunnel of darkness that our flashlights could only partially penetrate. Office doors stood open on both sides, and it was in the Human Resources office that we saw the lights Tyler had reported. Not flashlights, as we'd expected. Battery-powered LED work lights, the kind construction crews use, set up on tripods. Professional equipment. The room had been transformed into some kind of makeshift workspace. Tables had been cleared of decades of dust and debris. Laptops sat open, their screens dark, but cooling fans still humming. Extension cords snaked across the floor to a portable generator humming in the corner. That explained the lack of street power. But it was what was on the tables that made my blood run cold. Files. Hundreds of them, manila folders with the Stillwater Company logo, spread out in organized rows. Someone was going through the old company records, methodically photographing each page with a high-end digital camera mounted on another tripod. The setup looked like something from a document preservation project, except this was being done in secret, in a condemned building, in the middle of the night. Next to the files were evidence bags, the kind we used at crime scenes. Each one contained personal effects, watches, rings, ID badges, all tagged with names and dates. One bag made my stomach turn. It contained children's drawings, the kind proud parents would have kept in their office. Crayon pictures of families, homes, pets. Normal life. Each drawing was labeled with a different child's name, but they all had the same date. October 15th, 1987. The day Stillwater officially closed. Marcus picked up one of the files, squinting at it in the LED light. These are personnel records from 1986. Medical files, looks like. Why would someone... He trailed off, his face paling as he read. I looked over his shoulder. The file documented medical examinations of Stillwater employees, but these weren't normal checkups. Blood work showing abnormal cell counts. Chest x-rays with shadows that shouldn't be there. Handwritten notes in the margins. Subject shows expected progression. Recommend continued observation. Do not inform patient. But it was the last page that made everything clear. A memo on official Stillwater letterhead, dated June 1986, marked Eyes Only, Project Director. Phase 1. Trials showing promising results. 40% of exposed subjects displaying desired genetic markers. Recommend expansion to Phase 2 despite increased mortality projections. Federal Oversight Committee has been successfully redirected. Continue as planned. Jesus Christ, Marcus breathed. They were experimenting on their own workers. Before I could respond, we heard it. Footsteps coming from somewhere above us. Not trying to be quiet, but moving with purpose. Then voices, muffled but urgent. We killed our flashlights immediately, moving by the ambient glow of the LED work lights. How many? A man's voice drifted down through the ventilation grates. The voice was educated, professional, with the kind of authority that came from giving orders, not taking them. 3 more on B2, but the locks are rusted. Going to need the plasma cutter. A woman this time, matter of fact, like they were discussing grocery shopping. But there was something underneath her casual tone. A tension that suggested they were running out of time. We don't have time. He said the window is closing tomorrow. The man again, frustrated. The demolition crew will be here at dawn, and this time nothing's going to stop them. We need those bodies out tonight. Bodies. My blood ran cold. I thought of Sarah Whitman, the missing journalism student. 3 weeks missing. Could she still be alive down there? What about the police units outside? A third voice, younger, nervous. Local patrol. They won't come in without hazmat gear, and that'll take at least an hour to arrange. We'll be gone by then, just stick to the plan. Marcus and I exchanged glances. B2, basement level 2. The building plans we'd studied at the academy had only shown 1 basement level. My hand moved to my radio, but the static that erupted when I keyed the mic was deafening in the silence. No signal. The building's metal frame and our depth inside were blocking everything. Or maybe something else was blocking it. That unusual interference the dispatcher had mentioned suddenly seemed less like coincidence and more like design. The footsteps were moving now, heading toward the stairs. We had seconds to decide, confront them or evade. Every instinct told me to pull back, call for that backup we should have waited for in the first place. But those medical files, the mention of 3 more on B2, more what? More files, more evidence, or more people? And they'd mentioned bodies specifically. Not files, not evidence. Bodies they needed to remove before demolition. Bodies that had been here for how long? The decision was made for us when the light suddenly cut out, plunging us into absolute darkness. Not just the work lights, even the exit signs, which should have had battery backup, went dead. In that suffocating blackness, I heard Marcus's sharp intake of breath. Felt him bump into me as he reached for his flashlight. "Don't," I whispered, grabbing his wrist. In this darkness, our lights would make us targets. But then I heard something else, something that made my decision for me. From somewhere below us, echoing up through the ventilation system, came a sound that turned my blood to ice. A voice, weak but unmistakable, calling out, "Help! Someone! Please!" It was female, young, alive. Sarah Whitman. Footsteps on the stairs now, coming up, not down. Multiple sets, moving fast but coordinated. They knew exactly where they were going, even in the pitch black. That meant they'd been here before, many times. This wasn't a one-night operation. We moved by feel and memory, trying to reach the opposite stairwell. My shin connected painfully with an overturned chair, the scrape of metal on concrete impossibly loud. The footsteps stopped. "Did you hear that?" The woman's voice, much closer now, maybe just outside the HR office. Could be settling. "This place is falling apart." But the man didn't sound convinced. A beam of light swept through the doorway, powerful and precise. Not the scattered beam of a civilian flashlight, but something tactical. It passed inches from where we crouched behind an overturned desk, close enough that I could see the individual, dust motes floating in its path. Then Marcus's radio, which I thought he'd turned off, erupted with static. Just a half-second burst, but enough. The light snapped toward us immediately. "Police! Don't move!" I shouted, bringing up my own flashlight and weapon simultaneously. The sudden brightness was blinding after the darkness. I saw shapes, 2, maybe 3 figures in black, faces covered with respirator masks. One was reaching for something and training took over. "Hands! Let me see your hands." They scattered. Not toward us or away, but in different directions. Coordinated, like they'd rehearsed this. One dove through a doorway to our left. Another vaulted over a desk and crashed through what remained of a window partition. The third, the woman, I thought, simply dropped straight down, and I realized too late there was an open vent grating in the floor. Marcus went after the one who'd gone left while I pursued the window jumper. The hallway beyond was a maze of overturned furniture and hanging ceiling debris. My flashlight beam caught glimpses. A black jacket disappearing around a corner. The red exit sign at the far end suddenly illuminating as if power had been restored just to that one fixture. I followed, knowing I was being led, knowing it was probably a trap, but unable to shake the feeling that we'd stumbled onto something much bigger than trespassing. The corridor ended at another stairwell, this one leading up to the 4th floor and down to the basement. Fresh scratches on the door frame showed recent use. Up or down? The voice I'd heard earlier, the cry for help, had come from below. But these people were professionals, and splitting up in a building like this went against every protocol. That's when I heard Marcus yell. Not a shout of pursuit or command, but pain. Real, immediate pain. I turned and ran back, my flashlight beam swinging wildly through the darkness. I found him in what had been the IT department, on the ground holding his leg. Blood seeped between his fingers. "Tripwire," he gasped. "Razor wire across the doorway." Didn't see it. The cut was deep but clean across his shin. I pulled out my first aid kit, working quickly to stop the bleeding while keeping my flashlight moving, watching for movement. The building had gone silent again, that oppressive quiet that made every sound seem amplified. "There's someone down there," I told him as I wrapped his leg. I heard a voice. Female. Could be the Whitman girl. Marcus gritted his teeth against the pain. "They said 3 more on B2 if she's one of them." "We need to get you out," I said, but Marcus shook his head. "They're destroying evidence down there. You heard them. The window closes tomorrow. Whatever they're hiding, this might be our only chance." He was right, but I wasn't leaving him. I helped him to his feet, supporting his weight. We made our way to the stairwell, moving slowly, checking every doorway for more traps. The stairs down were clear, but the door to the basement level had been recently modified. New hinges, industrial grade, and a card reader that looked absurdly modern against the decay around it. The reader was dark, unpowered, but the door was slightly ajar. Through the gap came a different smell. Not just chemicals, but something organic, like a hospital mixed with a greenhouse. We could hear activity below, metal on metal, voices giving instructions. "There should be 12 units total." A woman's voice, the same one from before. "We've confirmed 8. 4 must still be in the sealed section." "Leave them," a man replied. "We don't have suits rated for that level of contamination." "But the families will have to accept what we can give them." It's been 37 years. We're lucky anything survived at all. Marcus and I looked at each other. 37 years. 1987. The year Stillwater shut down. I eased the door open wider, wincing at the slight creak. The basement was lit with more LED work lights, revealing a corridor that shouldn't exist. The walls were clean white tile, not the concrete I expected. Medical grade, with drains in the floor and emergency shower stations every 20 feet. This wasn't a storage basement. This was a laboratory, and it went deeper than it should. The corridor sloped downward, and I could see multiple levels through glass panels in the floor. B2 was just the beginning. How deep did this go? We descended slowly, Marcus leaning heavily on me, our shadows long in the artificial light. The voices were coming from deeper in, past a set of double doors with circular windows. Through them, I could see figures in hazmat suits working around what looked like industrial freezers, the kind medical facilities use for long-term storage. One of the freezers was open, and what I saw inside made my stomach turn. Not bodies, exactly, but containers. Medical specimen containers, each labeled with a name, a date, and a series of numbers. The dates were all from 1986 and 1987. But there was something else. In the corner of the room, separated from the freezers, were 3 gurneys. 2 were empty. On the third lay a figure, covered with a sheet but clearly human-shaped. And the sheet was moving slightly, breathing. "Officer Miller," a voice said behind us, and we spun around. A woman stood there, no hazmat suit, just regular clothes and a surgical mask. She looked exhausted, older than her voice suggested, with gray streaking through her dark hair. She wasn't armed, and her hands were raised slightly, non-threatening. "Please don't shoot. My name is Dr. Lauren King. I'm the one who called this in." "You called?" I started, confused. "Tyler Bennett called it in." She shook her head. "Tyler Bennett died 6 months ago, heart attack. I've been using his name, his codes, to access the warehouse security system, to watch this place, to wait for them to finally come." She gestured toward the workers in hazmat suits. I was the assistant lab director here when Stillwater closed. I was 25. I've been waiting 37 years for someone to come for them. "For who?" Marcus asked, his voice strained from pain. "The workers who died during the experiments. Management told their families they'd been cremated, but they weren't. They kept them here in the sub-basement for further study. When the EPA shut us down, the company sealed this level, made it disappear from official records. But I knew. I've always known." She paused, looking back at the room with the gurneys. "And it's not just the dead. Some of the test subjects, the experiments changed them, made them something else. Something that doesn't age normally, doesn't die easily. We've kept 3 alive down here all this time. The company claimed they died in the chemical leak, but they've been here, in induced comas, for 37 years. "That's impossible," I said. But even as I spoke, I remembered the voice calling for help. Young. Desperate. Very much alive. "Sarah Whitman found us 3 weeks ago," Dr. King continued. "She'd pieced together enough from public records to know something was wrong. She found me, convinced me it was time. I brought her here to document everything, but the company still has watchers. They caught her. They were going to add her to the collection, make her disappear like the others. But I couldn't let that happen. I sedated her instead, kept her safe until I could arrange for proper authorities to come." One of the hazmat-suited figures noticed us and started to approach, but Lauren waved them back. "These are the police officers. The ones I told you about." The figure pulled back their hood, revealing a middle-aged man with kind eyes. "I'm Dr. Gabriel Flores with the State Medical Examiner's Office. Ms. King contacted us 6 weeks ago with documentation about illegal medical experiments and improper handling of human remains. We've been planning this recovery operation since then." "This is a crime scene," I said, my cop instincts kicking in despite the surreal situation. "You can't just—" "We have full authorization," Dr. Flores interrupted gently, pulling out official documentation. State and federal. This is a joint operation with the EPA, CDC, and FBI. We couldn't tell local law enforcement because—" he paused, choosing his words carefully. "Because Stillwater Industries still has connections. People who would have interfered if they'd known we were coming." He walked us over to the gurneys. On the one with the moving sheet, he pulled it back slightly. It was Sarah Whitman, unconscious but breathing steadily. "She's sedated but unharmed. We'll have her transported to the hospital as soon as we secure the scene." "And the others?" I asked, looking at the empty gurneys. Dr. King's expression darkened. "The 2 survivors from the original experiments. They're in the sealed section, level B4. We can't reach them without proper equipment. They're not entirely human anymore. The experiments were designed to create enhanced workers, people who could survive in extreme conditions. It worked, but at a cost. They're alive, but they're not right." Lauren stepped forward, pulling a thick manila envelope from her bag. "The 3 people you chased upstairs, they weren't with us. They've been coming here for weeks, removing specific files. The ones that name the people responsible. The executives who ordered the experiments, the doctors who conducted them, the government officials who looked the other way. Many of them are still alive, still prominent, still powerful." She handed me the envelope. Inside were photocopies of documents, medical records, internal memos, names I recognized. Business leaders, city council members, even a judge. All connected to Stillwater, all complicit in what had happened here. "We made copies of everything before they could destroy it all," Lauren continued. "But they don't know that. They think they've covered their tracks." Marcus shifted beside me, his breathing labored. "The people upstairs, they said something about the window closing tomorrow." Dr. Flores nodded grimly. "The demolition. The real one, this time. Tomorrow morning, this whole complex is being leveled. Emergency order, pushed through by people with the power to make it happen. They found out we were coming. This is their last attempt to bury everything." "But you're here now," I pointed out. "You can stop it." "We can recover the remains," Dr. Flores said. "Give these people the proper burial they deserve. But the building, the evidence of what happened here, that'll be gone by noon tomorrow." I thought about the files upstairs, the documentation of systematic medical experimentation on unwitting workers, the powerful people who'd profited from it, who were still profiting from keeping it hidden. The 3 intruders who'd fled when we'd confronted them, probably already reporting back to their employers that the police were involved. "You recorded everything?" I asked Lauren. "Photographed all the documents?" She nodded. "Everything I could access. 17 hard drives worth, hidden in 12 different locations, with instructions to release if anything happens to me." Smart, paranoid, but smart. 37 years of waiting would make anyone paranoid. Dr. Flores and his team worked through the night. We watched them carefully remove each specimen container, treating them with the dignity they'd been denied for decades. Each one represented a person, a family who'd never known the truth about what happened to their loved one. Marcus needed medical attention, but he refused to leave, sitting on a crate with his leg elevated, documenting everything on his phone. The names were the hardest part. As each container was cataloged, Lauren would tell us about them. Maria Santos worked in packaging, had 3 kids. They still live in town, still wonder why their mother's body was so badly burned they couldn't have an open casket. David Morrison, quality control, was 2 weeks from retirement. His wife never remarried, said she couldn't move on without understanding what really happened. Jennifer Liu, secretary, had just gotten engaged. Her fiancé, Thomas, still visits what he thinks is her grave every anniversary. By dawn, they'd recovered 43 containers from the unsealed sections. The sealed area, behind a massive steel door marked with radiation warnings, remained unexplored. Whatever was in there would have to stay. The demolition crews would arrive in 3 hours. As we emerged from the building, the sunrise painting the industrial wasteland in shades of orange and gold. I saw vehicles arriving. Not the hazmat trucks or evidence vans I expected, but construction vehicle and demolition equipment. They were early. They know, Lauren said quietly. They know we found them. A black SUV pulled up, and a man in an expensive suit stepped out. I recognized him from the photocopied documents. Daniel Brooks, now a senior partner at a major law firm, then a junior executive at Stillwater Industries. He surveyed the scene, his face impassive, then walked over to us. "Officer Miller," he said, somehow knowing my name. "I trust you understand the sensitive nature of this situation. The city has invested considerable resources in the redevelopment of this area. It would be unfortunate if unfounded rumors about ancient history were to derail such important progress." "Unfounded?" Marcus spoke up from where he was being loaded into an ambulance. "We have evidence. You have trespassed in a condemned building scheduled for emergency demolition," Brooks interrupted smoothly. "Any materials found inside would be inadmissible, naturally. And I'm sure you're aware that breaking and entering, even for law enforcement, requires proper warrants." He was right, technically. We'd entered without a warrant, following what we thought was an emergency call. Any evidence we'd found would be challenged in court, probably successfully. But Brooks had made a mistake. He'd shown up. He'd revealed that he was still involved, still protecting the secret. "Mr. Brooks," Dr. Flores said, stepping forward with his federal documentation. "I'm sure you'll be interested to know that our recovery operation is fully authorized. Every specimen, every document, every piece of evidence has been properly collected under federal jurisdiction. The families of the victims will be notified, and a full investigation will be conducted." For the first time, Brooks's composure cracked. Just slightly, a tightness around his eyes. "I see. Well, I suppose that's that then. Good day, gentlemen." He walked back to his SUV, already pulling out his phone. Within an hour, the demolition was postponed, pending review. Within a week, it was canceled altogether. The building still stands, surrounded by new fencing, under federal protection as a crime scene. The investigation is ongoing. Lauren King is in witness protection, her 17 hard drives of evidence slowly being processed by federal investigators. Some of the names on those documents have quietly retired or relocated. Others have hired very expensive lawyers. But the story doesn't end there. 3 weeks after that night, I received a call at home. My personal cell, not my police phone. The voice was electronically distorted, but the message was clear. "Check the storm drain at Riverside Chemical. Level B3. You'll want to see this before they seal it tomorrow." Riverside Chemical. Another abandoned facility, closed in 1992 after a chlorine gas leak killed 12 workers. Another industrial tragedy that was settled out of court, buried in paperwork, forgotten by everyone except the families who lost someone. I went alone this time. I know I shouldn't have, but something told me this was connected to Stillwater, to the network of corporate crimes that Lauren King had spent decades documenting. The storm drain was exactly where the caller said it would be, and it had been recently cleared. Fresh tool marks showed where someone had cut through years of rust and debris. Inside, the tunnel led to a sub-basement that, like Stillwater's, wasn't on any official building plans. But this one was different. This wasn't a laboratory or a storage facility. This was an archive. File cabinets stretched from floor to ceiling, dozens of them, each one meticulously labeled. Not just Riverside Chemical, but Stillwater Industries, Kruger Metal Works, Hammond Pharmaceuticals, every major industrial facility in the district that had closed under suspicious circumstances. Thousands of documents that should have been destroyed, all preserved here. And in the center of the room, working at a desk under a battery-powered lantern, was Tyler Bennett. The real Tyler Bennett. Very much alive, despite what Lauren King had told us. "Officer Miller," he said without looking up. "I was wondering when you'd come." He explained everything. He had faked his death 6 months ago with Lauren's help, knowing that the company was closing in on them. The heart attack was staged, the death certificate forged by a sympathetic doctor who'd lost his own father to Stillwater's experiments. Tyler had gone underground, literally, continuing to gather evidence while Lauren worked to bring in the federal authorities. "Lauren doesn't know I'm alive," he said. "Safer for her that way. If they thought she was lying about my death, they'd look closer at everything else." Tyler had been building this archive for 20 years, breaking into abandoned buildings, copying files before demolition crews arrived, saving evidence that powerful people thought was gone forever. He showed me maps, building plans, financial records connecting dozens of companies to a single parent corporation, Prometheus Group, a holding company registered in Delaware with subsidiaries throughout the industrial Midwest. Stillwater was just one experiment, Tyler explained. Each facility was testing something different. Enhanced workers at Stillwater, chemical weapons at Riverside, biological agents at Hammond. They were using the whole industrial district as a laboratory, and the workers were the test subjects. He handed me a file marked Current Operations. My blood ran cold as I read. Prometheus Group hadn't stopped. They'd just gotten better at hiding. New facilities, legitimate on the surface, but with sub-basements that didn't appear on any plans. New experiments, more subtle, but no less deadly. And new test subjects recruited from homeless populations, undocumented workers, people who wouldn't be missed. "There's a facility operating right now," Tyler said, pointing to a map. "Midwest Medical Research. They claim to be developing new cancer treatments, but look at their mortality rates. Look at how many test subjects withdraw from the study and are never seen again." I wanted to act immediately, to raid the facility, to stop whatever was happening. But Tyler stopped me. "You go in guns blazing, they'll destroy everything and disappear. We need to do this right, build a case they can't escape." That was 6 months ago. Since then, I've been working with Tyler in secret, gathering evidence, documenting patterns. Marcus recovered fully from his leg injury and joined us. Dr. Flores officially knows nothing about our continued investigation, but unofficially he's been feeding us information from the federal case. Sarah Whitman woke up in the hospital with no memory of the 3 weeks she was missing. The sedatives Lauren used were powerful, designed to prevent the formation of traumatic memories. It's probably better that way. She finished her thesis on industrial accidents, but changed her focus to environmental remediation. She doesn't go near abandoned buildings anymore. The 2 survivors from Stillwater's original experiments, the ones trapped in the sealed section, are still there. The federal government claims it's too dangerous to attempt a rescue, but Tyler showed me the real reason. Classified documents revealing that those survivors aren't victims anymore. The experiments changed them into something else, something that feeds on human tissue, something that has to be kept contained. The company knew this, sealed them in, and left them to die. But they didn't die, they adapted. They're still alive down there, 4 levels below ground, waiting. Marcus still partners with me on patrol. We don't talk about Stillwater much, but sometimes, when we're called to an abandoned building or an industrial site, we share a look. We're more careful now, more thorough. We document everything. We ask questions that might seem irrelevant. We look for patterns, connections, the stories that structures tell about the people who built them, worked in them, died in them. Last month, we got another call about lights in an abandoned building. This time, it was the old Hammond Pharmaceuticals plant. Same pattern, professional equipment, someone photographing documents, evidence of a hidden basement laboratory. But this time, we were ready. We had warrants, we had federal backup, we had hazmat teams standing by. We caught them, 3 people in black, the same ones who'd escaped from Stillwater. They turned out to be private military contractors hired by Prometheus Group to sanitize crime scenes before demolition. They had lists of facilities, schedules for destruction, maps of hidden areas that needed to be cleared. One of them, under interrogation, revealed something that chilled me to the bone. Stillwater wasn't closed because of the experiments. It was closed because the experiments succeeded. They created what they wanted: enhanced humans capable of surviving extreme conditions. But those humans were uncontrollable, dangerous, and virtually impossible to kill. The company sealed them in the sub-basements and walked away, leaving them to die. Except they didn't die. "How many?" I asked him. "How many enhanced are still alive?" He looked me in the eye and said, "We don't know. Could be dozens, could be hundreds. They're in facilities all over the Midwest, sealed in, forgotten. But seals don't last forever. Concrete cracks, steel rusts. Eventually, they'll get out." That was 2 weeks ago. Since then, there have been 3 reported disappearances near abandoned industrial sites. The bodies haven't been found. The FBI is investigating, but they're looking at it as potential serial killer cases. They don't know about the enhanced. They don't know what's possibly escaping from decades-old tombs. Tyler Bennett continues his work from the shadows. He sent me a message yesterday. Check the news about Midwest medical research. The headline was small, buried on page 6. Medical research facility closes. Suddenly, cites funding issues. But I knew better. They were running, destroying evidence, preparing to resurrect somewhere else under a different name. But we're watching now. Tyler in his underground archive, Marcus and I on patrol, Dr. Flores in his federal position, Lauren King from Witness Protection. We're a network of people who know the truth, who refuse to let it be buried again. The forbidden areas of our cities aren't just abandoned buildings and condemned structures. They're the places where power doesn't want us to look, where profit matters more than people, where the truth is more dangerous than any chemical contamination. They're all around us, hidden in plain sight, protected by lawyers and lobbyists and legislation. But every forbidden area has its weak point. Every cover-up has its flaw. Every secret has someone who knows it. Someone who's been waiting, planning, preparing for the right moment to bring it into the light. Winter came early that year, and with it, a series of incidents that would finally expose the full scope of what we were dealing with. It started with a 911 call from a security guard at the new Amazon distribution center built on the site of the old Kruger Metalworks plant. "There's someone in the walls," he said, his voice shaking. "I can hear them moving around inside the walls." Marcus and I responded, thinking it was probably just settling noises in the new construction. But when we arrived, we found the security guard, James Patterson, visibly shaken. He played us recordings from his phone, distinct footsteps, voices, what sounded like metal on concrete, all coming from inside the walls of a building that had been constructed just 6 months ago. The contractors found something when they were laying the foundation, Patterson told us. A sealed door, like a bunker entrance. The foreman said to just concrete over it, that it was probably an old basement from the Kruger plant. But I don't think. They sealed it properly. I think someone's been getting in. We called for backup and a building inspector. What we found changed everything. The new distribution center had been built directly over Kruger's sub-basement levels, the ones that didn't appear on any official plans. The contractors had indeed found an entrance and sealed it, but someone had been tunneling in from a different direction. Following the tunnel, we found ourselves in a massive underground complex that connected not just to the old Kruger site, but to Stillwater, Riverside Chemical, Hammond Pharmaceuticals, all of them. A network of tunnels running beneath the entire industrial district. Tyler Bennett was right. It wasn't separate experiments at separate facilities. It was one massive project, connected underground, hidden beneath the legitimate factories above. In one section of the tunnels we found living quarters. Recent living quarters. Beds with fresh sheets, working refrigerators stocked with food, computers still warm from use. Someone had been living down here, maybe for years, moving through the tunnel system, accessing all the abandoned facilities from below. On one of the computers we found detailed maps of the tunnel system. It was vast, stretching for miles, with sections marked in different colors. Green for cleared, yellow for contaminated but accessible, red for sealed, do not enter. The red sections were numerous, and each one had a date and a code name. Lazarus section, sealed 1987. Prometheus Ward, sealed 1992. Evolution Chamber, sealed 1999. Marcus found a logbook, handwritten entries dating back 5 years. The author identified themselves only as Keeper, and their job seemed to be maintaining the seals on the red sections, monitoring for breaches, and occasionally feeding whatever was inside. The last entry was from 3 days ago. Section 7 seal showing stress fractures. Increased vocalizations from inside. They know we're here. Running out of time. New construction above is weakening structural integrity. Recommend immediate evacuation of tunnel network. May God forgive us for what we've created. We pulled back, called in federal authorities, the EPA, everyone we could think of. Within hours, the distribution center was evacuated, the area cordoned off. But it was too late. That night, something broke through the Section 7 seal. The first responders described it as humanoid, but wrong. 7 feet tall, elongated limbs, skin that seemed to shift and change color like a chameleon. It moved faster than anything human should be able to move. It killed 2 federal agents before disappearing back into the tunnels. That's when the government finally admitted what they'd known all along. Project Prometheus wasn't just about creating enhanced workers. It was a military project, an attempt to create super soldiers using industrial workers as test subjects. The experiments had succeeded beyond their wildest dreams, creating beings that were stronger, faster, and more resilient than normal humans. But they'd also created monsters that couldn't be controlled, creatures driven insane by the transformations they'd undergone. The solution had been simple and horrific. Seal them in and let them die. Except they didn't die. They adapted. They survived. And now, with new construction disturbing the old seals, they were escaping. The evacuation zone expanded to a 5-mile radius around the industrial district. The official story was a chemical leak, potential contamination, the usual lies. But those of us who knew the truth understood this was about containing something far worse than chemicals. I met with Tyler Bennett one last time before the evacuation. He gave me a flash drive containing everything. 40 years of evidence, thousands of documents, Proof of crimes that went all the way to the highest levels of government and industry. "Get this out," he said. "Whatever happens here, people need to know the truth." "Come with us," I urged. "You can't stay here." But Tyler shook his head. "Someone needs to watch. Someone needs to make sure they don't just bury this again. I've been guarding these secrets for 20 years. I'm not stopping now." That was the last time I saw him. The next day, the military moved in with flamethrowers and concrete trucks. They spent 3 weeks systematically sealing every entrance to the tunnel system, pumping thousands of tons of concrete into the underground network. They claimed they got all the enhanced, that the threat was contained. But I know better. Because last week, 500 miles away in another state, an abandoned factory that had been closed since 1985 suddenly had lights in its windows. The local police responded and found evidence of recent activity, the same kind of medical equipment, the same types of files, the same signs of underground construction. The network is bigger than just our industrial district. Prometheus Group had facilities across the country, maybe across the world, and in each one, sealed away in forgotten basements and abandoned tunnels, the enhanced weight. Some are victims, driven mad by transformation. Others have adapted, evolved, become something that barely remembers being human. Marcus transferred to a federal task force dedicated to tracking down Prometheus facilities. He says they've identified at least 30 sites that match the pattern. Dr. Flores is leading a team trying to develop ways to safely contain or cure the enhanced, though he admits they're years away from any real solutions. Lauren King's testimony to Congress led to hearings, investigations, promises of reform. But Prometheus Group's assets had been transferred offshore years ago, its executives scattered to non-extradition countries. The company might be gone, but the people responsible are still out there, still free, probably starting new experiments under new names. Sarah Whitman published her thesis, though heavily edited to remove any mention of her experience at Stillwater. She doesn't know about the enhanced, doesn't know how close she came to becoming one of them. It's better that way. Some truths are too heavy for civilians to carry. I still patrol the sealed industrial district, now a dead zone in the heart of the city. The buildings stand empty, surrounded by military fencing, monitored by cameras and motion sensors. Officially, it's still contaminated, will be for decades. Unofficially, it's a prison, holding things that can't be allowed to escape. Sometimes, late at night, I park outside the fence and listen. Usually, there's nothing but wind and the settling of old structures. But occasionally, I hear something else. Sounds from deep underground. Movement. Voices that aren't quite human anymore. They're still alive down there, sealed in their concrete tombs, waiting. The forbidden areas of our cities aren't just abandoned buildings anymore. They're containment zones, holding the results of experiments that should never have been conducted. Every major city has them. Industrial districts that were closed for environmental reasons, medical facilities that were shut down for safety violations, research centers that were abandoned for budget cuts. But those of us who know the truth understand what's really being contained. I keep Tyler's flash drive in a safety deposit box, along with my own documentation. Insurance, in case anyone tries to make this disappear again. The truth is too important, too dangerous to let die. Because Prometheus Group might be gone, but the mindset that created it, the willingness to experiment on human beings, to treat workers as test subjects, to hide crimes behind corporate veils, and that mindset is still very much alive. There are new companies now, with different names but similar goals. They've learned from Prometheus's mistakes. They're more careful, more subtle. They use offshore facilities, international waters, places where regulations are weak and oversight is non-existent. But they're still doing it, still pushing the boundaries of human enhancement. still creating monsters in the name of progress. And somewhere, in abandoned buildings and forgotten tunnels, the enhanced wait. The first generation, crude and uncontrolled. But what about the second generation? The third? How many more Prometheus groups are out there, learning from the failures, refining the process? I think about this every time I pass a construction site building over old industrial land. Every time a factory closes suddenly for vague reasons. Every time someone reports strange sounds from an abandoned building. The forbidden areas are multiplying, and each one might hide another horror, another secret, another threat. The official investigation into Stillwater Industries ended 6 months ago. 43 families received settlements and official apologies. A memorial was erected in the city park, listing the names of the known victims. But the real victim count is unknown. How many people disappeared into those experiments? How many enhanced are still alive, still trapped, still waiting? Tyler Bennett is officially still dead, but I know he's out there somewhere. Every now and then, I get an anonymous message pointing me toward a new lead, a new facility that needs investigating. He's built a network of watchers, people who monitor the forbidden areas, who document the strange incidents, who refuse to let the truth be buried. We call ourselves the Keepers now, after that logbook we found in the tunnels. We watch the places that aren't supposed to exist, investigate the incidents that don't make the news, document the crimes that powerful people want forgotten. It's dangerous work, and more than a few keepers have disappeared over the years. But someone has to do it. Someone has to watch the forbidden areas. Because the alternative, letting them operate in darkness, letting the experiments continue, letting the enhanced escape, is too terrible to contemplate. Last week, I trained a new recruit, a young officer named Jessica Martinez. She reminded me of myself 15 years ago, eager and idealistic, thinking the badge meant something simple and clear. I showed her the industrial district, told her the official story about chemical contamination. But then I gave her a choice. You can accept that story and patrol like normal, I said. Or you can know the truth. But once you know, you can't unknow it. You become responsible for it. She chose truth. They always do, the good ones. So now she knows about Stillwater, about Prometheus Group, about the enhanced sealed-in concrete tombs beneath our feet. She knows about the forbidden areas that exist in every city, the corporate crimes that hide behind environmental disasters, the experiments that continue in places we're not supposed to look. And, like all of us who know, she watches, she documents, she prepares for the day when the seals fail, when the enhanced escape, when the truth can no longer be contained. Because that day is coming. Tyler's latest message contained seismic data showing increasing structural instability in the tunnel system. The concrete is cracking, the seals are weakening, and deep underground, things that were human once are testing their prisons, learning, adapting, preparing. The forbidden areas of our cities are time bombs and the clock is ticking. But as long as there are people willing to watch, to document, to refuse to let the truth die, there's hope. Hope that when the inevitable happens, we'll be ready. Hope that the next Prometheus group will be stopped before they create more monsters. Hope that the forbidden areas will one day be opened, cleaned, healed. Until then, we watch. We wait. We remember. Because in the end, that's all we can do. Bear witness to the horrors hidden in our midst, document the crimes of the powerful, and ensure that when the time comes for accounting, the evidence survives. The Stillwater Industrial Complex still stands, a monument to corporate evil and the persistence of truth. Every time I drive past it on patrol, I remember that night 15 years ago when a simple trespassing call revealed a conspiracy that went deeper than anyone imagined. I remember the 43 workers whose bodies were kept in freezers. I remember the enhanced, sealed in concrete tombs. I remember Tyler Bennett, still out there, still watching. The call came on Thursday morning at 3:47 a.m., toward the end of October. It came not from the normal center, but from a secure federal line that had never been used in the 12 years I had worked in my department. The voice on the other end of the line was cool but insistent, and identified itself as Colonel Harrison from the Air Force Office of Special Investigations. Detective Johnson, we need local law enforcement assistance at the decommissioned Black Rock radar station. A maintenance crew of 3 went in yesterday afternoon for routine environmental monitoring. They haven't checked in for 14 hours. My name is Olivia Johnson, and I've worked everything from narcotics to homicide in my career. But federal military sites? That was new territory. Black Rock radar station sat 40 miles northeast of town, right on the edge of the restricted zone near the Canadian border. It had been part of the old DEW line, the distant early warning system from the Cold War. Officially decommissioned in 1993, but the Feds still maintained it for environmental monitoring purposes. Why not send your own people? I asked, already pulling on my jacket. We have a team en route, but they're 6 hours out. The maintenance crew might be injured, time sensitive. He paused. Detective, I need to be clear. You're authorized to enter the facility for search and rescue only. Document nothing. Touch nothing beyond what's necessary for the rescue. Understood? I understood plenty. They wanted us to do the dangerous part while keeping our mouths shut about whatever we found. My partner that night was Ashley Thompson, a 5-year veteran who transferred from Seattle PD. She had that West Coast calm about her. Nothing seemed to rattle her. When I explained the situation, she just nodded and grabbed the keys to our unit. Federal site means federal overtime, right? The drive to Black Rock took us through progressively emptier territory. First, the suburbs thinned out, then the farms, then even the trees seemed to pull back from the road. By the time we reached the access road, marked only by a weather-beaten sign reading, "Federal property, no trespassing," the landscape was mostly scrub brush and exposed rock. The GPS started glitching about 2 miles from the station, the display flickering between our actual location and somewhere in the middle of Hudson Bay. The station itself was exactly what you'd expect from Cold War paranoia mixed with decades of neglect. A massive radar dome, once white, but now streaked with rust and bird droppings, sat atop a concrete building that looked like it could survive a direct nuclear hit. The parking area held a single vehicle, a white van with Northern Environmental Services on the side, the maintenance crew's transportation. 3 sets of footprints going in, Ashley observed, crouching near the main entrance. The heavy steel doors stood open, unusual for a federal facility. None coming out. The entrance led to a narrow corridor lit by emergency lighting that cast everything in a sickly green glow. Our flashlights did little to improve the situation, their beams seeming to be swallowed by the oppressive concrete walls. The air was stale, but carried an underlying scent I couldn't identify, something between ozone and copper. "Hello, Federal Maintenance Crew? This is the police." My voice echoed strangely, not bouncing back the way it should, but seeming to spiral away into the building's depths. The first floor was administrative, offices with furniture from the 1970s, file cabinets that had been emptied long ago, a break room with a coffee maker that probably hadn't been cleaned since Bush Sr. was president. Everything was covered in a fine layer of dust, except for a clear path down the main hallway, evidence of the maintenance crew's passage. We followed their trail to a stairwell. According to the building schematic posted on the wall, faded and water-stained but still readable, the facility had 4 sublevels. The radar equipment was on sublevel 1, power generation on sublevel 2, communications on sublevel 3, and sublevel 4 was simply marked restricted. The footprints in the dust led down. They were supposed to be checking environmental monitors, Ashley said quietly. Those would be on the main floor, or maybe the first sublevel. Why go deeper? As we descended, that strange smell grew stronger. The emergency lighting became more sporadic, with long stretches of darkness between functioning fixtures. On sublevel 1, we found the first sign of trouble. A hard hat lying in the middle of the corridor, its light still on but dimming. "Jordan?" I called out, reading the name stenciled on the hat. "Jordan Price? This is the police. We're here to help." No response, but as the echo of my voice faded, we heard something else. A low hum, almost below the range of human hearing, that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It made my teeth ache and my inner ear feel wrong, like the sensation just before a severe pressure change. The trail led us past rooms full of antiquated radar equipment, massive machines with dials and switches that belonged in a museum. Some of the equipment was still running, lights blinking in patterns that seemed random but probably meant something to someone. The humming grew stronger, and I noticed Ashley kept touching her ear, wincing. "You feel that too?" I asked. "It's like pressure. But not pressure, I can't explain it." She looked pale in the flashlight beam. "We should call this in." I tried my radio, static. Not normal static either. It had a pattern to it. Almost like Morse code, but not quite. My cell phone was completely dead, not just no signal, but powered off and unresponsive to the power button. We found the second hard hat on sublevel 2, near the entrance to what used to be the power generation room. The massive diesel generators stood silent, but there was newer equipment here, modern environmental monitoring devices with digital displays showing temperature, humidity, and radiation levels. All normal, according to the readings. But one monitor was smashed, its screen spiderwebbed with cracks radiating from a central impact point. Dark droplets on the floor nearby looked suspiciously like blood. "We need to get out," Ashley said. "Call for backup with the car radio." She was right. This was beyond a simple rescue. But as we turned to leave, we heard it. A voice, faint, but definitely human, coming from below. "Help, please." Ashley and I looked at each other. We couldn't leave someone behind. The stairs to sublevel 3 were different. Instead of utilitarian concrete, they were lined with some kind of metallic mesh that made our footsteps ring hollow. The walls here weren't concrete either, but some kind of composite material that seemed to absorb our flashlight beams. The humming was almost painful now, and I could feel it in my chest, making my heart skip beats. The communications level was a maze of rooms filled with equipment I didn't recognize. Not radar, not radio, something else. The machines were sleek, modern, with no visible manufacturer markings. Many were active, displays showing waveforms and data streams that meant nothing to me. In the center of it all was a room with walls lined with what looked like acoustic foam, the kind you'd see in a recording studio. Inside, we found the maintenance crew. 2 of them, anyway. Tyler Bennett and Megan Torres, according to their uniforms, were seated in chairs facing a large panel of equipment. They weren't restrained, but they weren't moving either. Their eyes were open, pupils dilated to the point where the irises were barely visible, and they were both muttering under their breath. It took me a moment to realize they were speaking in perfect synchronization, saying the same words at exactly the same time. The frequency must be maintained. The silence must not return. The frequency must be maintained. The silence must not return, over and over, like a mantra. "Tyler? Megan?" Ashley approached cautiously, reached out to touch Tyler's shoulder. The moment she made contact, both of them screamed. Not in pain, but in terror, as if waking from the worst nightmare imaginable. Tyler fell out of his chair, scrambling backward until he hit the wall. Megan curled into a fetal position, hands over her ears, whimpering. "The silence," Tyler gasped. "Don't let it come back. The frequency is all that keeps it away." "Keeps what away?" I knelt beside him, trying to get him to focus on me. His eyes were wild, unfocused. "It's been here since the beginning. Since before the station, the indigenous people knew. They called this place the Silent Earth. Nothing grows here. Animals avoid it because of what's underneath." "Tyler, where's Jordan? Where's the third member of your crew?" "He went to sublevel 4, said he had to check the transmitter, had to make sure it never stopped." Tyler grabbed my arm with surprising strength. He was right. If it stops, if the frequency stops, the silence comes back. And in the silence, it wakes up. Ashley was trying to get sense out of Megan, but she just kept repeating numbers. Coordinates, I realized, latitude and longitude. I wrote them down, though I had no idea what they marked. "We need to find Jordan and get everyone out," I said. "No." Tyler tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't support him. "You don't understand. The frequency generator on sublevel 4, it's failing. It's been for months. That's why we were really here. Not environmental monitoring. We were checking the backup systems, making sure the frequency would continue if the main generator failed." "What frequency? What are you talking about?" Tyler looked at me with haunted eyes. "In 1991, they found something. Deep underground, deeper than the station's foundations. Older than old. It was dormant, but when they tried to study it, it started to wake up. The only thing that kept it dormant was a specific frequency. 19.7 hertz, just below human hearing, but enough to create a resonance that contains it. Infrasound. I'd read about it in a forensics journal. Frequencies below human hearing that could cause feelings of dread, hallucinations, even physical symptoms. But Tyler was describing something else, something deliberate. "The station wasn't really decommissioned in '93, Tyler continued. "They just stopped using it for radar. Instead, they converted it to maintain the frequency. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for 30 years. But the equipment is failing, and they can't replace it without shutting it down. And if they shut it down..." A new sound interrupted him. Not the humming we'd been hearing, but something else. A deep, rhythmic pulsing that seemed to come from below. The lights flickered, and for just a moment, in the darkness between flashes, I saw something that shouldn't have been there. A shadow where no shadow should be, moving against the walls in ways that defied the geometry of the room. "The primary generator," Tyler whispered. "It's failing." Ashley and I didn't need to discuss it. We each grabbed one of the maintenance workers and started moving toward the stairs. But Tyler resisted. "Jordan's still down there. He's trying to start the backup manually. If he doesn't..." Tyler's words were cut off by a sudden silence. Not quiet. Silence. The complete absence of sound. The humming that had been omnipresent since we entered the facility was gone. The buzz of electronics, the hum of ventilation, even our own breathing seemed muted. And in that silence, something else became audible. Or, perhaps sensible is a better word, because it wasn't exactly a sound. It was a presence, vast and ancient and absolutely hostile to life as we understood it. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in seconds. Frost formed on the walls and our breath came out in clouds. The emergency lights didn't just fail, they exploded, showering us with fragments of glass and plastic. In the absolute darkness that followed, other lights appeared, not electric, but phosphorescent, like deep-sea creatures adapted to eternal night. "Move!" I shouted, though my voice sounded thin and distant. We ran. Not toward the stairs we'd come down, which were somehow wrong now, leading to places that shouldn't exist in a building with only 4 sublevels, but toward a maintenance shaft, Tyler pointed out. The ladder was ice cold and burned our hands, but we climbed. Behind us, below us, that presence expanded, filling the lower levels like water filling a container. I could hear it not with my ears, but with my bones, my teeth, my soul. It was looking for us, tasting the air for our fear, our warmth, our lives. We emerged on sublevel 1, the radar equipment now going haywire, screens showing impossible images, landscapes that weren't Earth, cities that had never been built, things that might have been alive if life could exist in those shapes. Tyler led us to a control panel I hadn't noticed before, hidden behind what looked like a janitor's closet. "Emergency backup," he gasped, his fingers flying over controls. "It won't hold for long, but maybe long enough for..." The floor beneath us cracked, not broke, not shattered, but cracked like ice over deep water. Through the cracks came light, that phosphorescent glow that hurt to look at directly, and sounds that weren't sounds, communications in frequencies that human ears were never meant to process but somehow did anyway, translating them into pure primal terror. Tyler hit a final switch, and the humming returned. Weaker than before, fluctuating, but there. The cracks in the floor began to seal, the lights faded, and that terrible presence receded like a tide pulling back from the shore. But we all knew it would return. "How long?" Ashley asked. "The backup?" "Maybe 6 hours, maybe less." Tyler slumped against the wall. Jordan knew. He knew the backup wouldn't start automatically. He went down to do it manually, knowing he might not make it back up in time. As if in response to his name, we heard footsteps on the stairs. Slow, uneven, but definitely footsteps. We turned our flashlights toward the stairwell, and Jordan Price emerged. His hair had turned completely white. His eyes were bloodshot to the point of being almost entirely red. His hands were covered in burns from handling equipment that had become superheated or frozen. But he was alive. "Started," he croaked. "Backup generator 4 is running. Should buy us a day, maybe 2. "We need to get you all to a hospital," I said. Jordan shook his head. "Can't leave. Someone has to monitor the frequency. If it drifts even a few hertz, the containment fails. That's why there's always a maintenance crew here. That's why there will always have to be." "That's insane," Ashley protested. "You can't stay here." "Someone has to," Megan said quietly. She'd been silent since we'd found her, but now her voice was steady, resolved. "That's the real job, not environmental monitoring. Frequency monitoring, making sure it never stops." I wanted to argue, but the radio on my belt suddenly crackled to life. "Detective Johnson, this is Colonel Harrison. Our team is 15 minutes out. What's your status?" I looked at the 3 maintenance workers, at Ashley, at the cracked floor that had already mostly healed itself. What could I say? That there was something underneath the station that predated human civilization? That the only thing keeping it contained was a sound too low for humans to hear? That 3 people had volunteered to spend their lives in this concrete tomb, making sure that sound never stopped? 3 survivors found, I said into the radio. They're stable. But Colonel, we need to talk about what's really going on here. Negative, Detective. Our team will handle it from here. You and Officer Thompson need to exit the facility immediately. Tyler grabbed my arm. Don't leave us here. Not alone. Not with them. The Colonel's team isn't coming to help, Tyler said.
They're coming to make sure we don't leave, to make sure we keep doing our job, to make sure nobody else finds out what's under this station. The footsteps outside weren't 15 minutes away. They were much closer. Multiple sets, moving with military precision. Ashley and I exchanged glances. "Is there another way out?" she asked. Jordan nodded weakly. "Service tunnel. Leads to the old guard shack about a quarter-mile away, but..." He hesitated. "It runs close to the containment area. If the frequency fluctuates while you're in there. We didn't have a choice. The footsteps were on our level now, and I could hear radio chatter. They were setting up a perimeter, making sure no one could leave." Tyler led us to the service tunnel while Jordan and Megan went back to the control room to monitor the frequency. The tunnel was narrow, lined with pipes and cables, and that omnipresent humming was stronger here, coming through the walls themselves. About halfway through, Ashley stopped. "Do you feel that?" I did. A vibration in the floor, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. Like something vast and alive beneath our feet, kept sleeping only by the lullaby of 19.7 hertz. We emerged into the guard shack just as black SUVs were pulling up to the main building. Ashley and I made it to our patrol car and drove away without lights, using only moonlight to navigate until we were miles from the station. Neither of us spoke until we were back in cell phone range. "What do we report?" Ashley asked. I thought about Tyler, Jordan, and Megan volunteering to stay in that place, to maintain the frequency that kept something unimaginable contained. I thought about the Colonel's team, there not to rescue but to ensure the status quo. I thought about the thing beneath the station, older than humanity, waiting for the sound to stop. We report that we found the maintenance crew suffering from exposure to infrasound, causing hallucinations and disorientation. We recommend medical evaluation and rotation of personnel to prevent long-term psychological effects. Ashley looked at me for a long moment. "And the truth?" "The truth is that some secrets exist for a reason. Some doors stay locked because what's behind them is worse than our ignorance." That was 6 months ago. I still check the news every morning, looking for any mention of Black Rock radar station. So far, nothing. But sometimes, late at night, I swear I can feel it. That 19.7 hertz frequency, transmitted through the Earth itself, a constant reminder that somewhere, 40 miles northeast of town, 3 people sit in a concrete tomb, making sure a sound never stops. I've done some research since then. The indigenous peoples of the area, the Anishinaabe, have legends about that land. They call it the place where the earth swallowed sound, where silence itself lives. They never built there, never hunted there, never even passed through if they could avoid it. When the government seized the land for the radar station in 1957, the tribal elders warned them. "Build elsewhere," they said. "That ground is cursed." But this was the height of the Cold War. The government needed radar coverage of the northern approaches, and indigenous legends weren't going to stop them. They built the station, dug deep foundations, and for 34 years, everything was fine. The radar worked, the staff rotated through their assignments, and if anyone noticed that nothing grew within a mile of the station, that animals avoided it, that even insects seemed reluctant to enter the area, they didn't report it. Then, in 1991, they decided to expand. To dig deeper, add more sublevels, upgrade the facility for the post-Cold War era. That's when they found it. The reports are classified beyond my clearance level, but I've pieced together fragments, a chamber not built but somehow formed, existing in a space that shouldn't have been there according to all geological surveys. Inside the chamber, something that defied description. Not alive in any biological sense, but aware. Waiting. The first team that entered the chamber came out changed. Some went catatonic. Others couldn't stop screaming. One, a physicist named Dr. Patricia Wu, spent 3 days writing equations on every available surface before suffering a massive stroke. Those equations, I'm told, suggested that what they'd found wasn't from Earth, wasn't from anywhere in our understanding of space-time. It existed adjacent to our reality, held back only by the thin membrane of what we call the physical world, and their intrusion had started to wake it up. The solution came from Dr. Wu's equations, interpreted by scientists who themselves required therapy afterward. A specific frequency, 19.7 hertz, created a resonance that reinforced the barrier between our world and wherever that thing originated. As long as the frequency was maintained, the entity, for lack of a better word, remained dormant. Stop the frequency, and the barrier would weaken. Stop it long enough, and the barrier would fail entirely. So they converted the station, installed massive infrasound generators, created triple redundancies, stationed maintenance crews who were really guards, making sure the frequency never stopped. For 30 years it worked. The entity slept, the barrier held, and only a handful of people knew how close we'd come to something unimaginable. But machines wear out. Technology becomes obsolete. And you can't replace the generators without shutting them down, even for a moment. They've tried everything, building new generators alongside the old ones, creating portable units to maintain the frequency during transitions, even attempting to move the entity somehow. Nothing worked. The moment the frequency stops, even for a second, it begins to wake. And each time it wakes, it takes longer to force it back to sleep. Tyler still emails me sometimes, using a secured connection that probably violates a dozen federal laws. The primary generator is down to 40% capacity. The backups are holding, but they're not designed for continuous operation. He estimates they have maybe 3 years before total system failure. The government is working on a
solution, something about creating a natural resonance using the bedrock itself, but it's theoretical at best. Jordan's hair never returned to its natural color. Megan doesn't speak anymore except to recite coordinates, different ones each time, marking locations around the globe. Tyler thinks there are other sites, other places where things that shouldn't exist are held back by increasingly fragile means. He's probably right. Black Rock isn't unique. It's part of a pattern, a network of sites where we've found things that challenge our understanding of reality and our place in it. Ashley transferred to another department 3 months after the incident. She couldn't sleep, she said. Kept hearing that frequency, feeling that presence beneath the station. The department therapist diagnosed her with PTSD and recommended medical leave. She took it, moved to Florida, as far from Black Rock as she could get while staying in the continental U.S. We don't talk about what happened, but sometimes she sends me articles about ultrasound, infrasound, about the effects of frequencies on human psychology and physiology. Her way of trying to rationalize what we experienced. But you can't rationalize something that exists outside the bounds of rational thought. You can't explain something that predates explanation itself. The official report, the one filed with the department and the federal agencies, describes a simple case of maintenance workers suffering from prolonged exposure to infrasound, causing hallucinations and psychological distress. It recommends better safety protocols, regular psychological evaluations, and strict rotation of personnel to prevent similar incidents. It's a perfectly reasonable report that explains nothing and protects everything. The real report, the one I've never written but carry in my head, would describe something else entirely. It would talk about the price of knowledge, about the things we found that we wish we hadn't. It would explain that some boundaries aren't meant to be crossed, some depths aren't meant to be explored, and some silences aren't empty but full of things waiting for their chance to exist in our world. But who would believe it? A defunct radar station maintaining a specific frequency to keep an otherworldly entity dormant. It sounds like the plot of a bad science fiction movie. Even I sometimes wonder if what we experienced was real, or some kind of shared hallucination brought on by infrasound exposure. Then I remember the cracks in the floor healing themselves, Jordan's white hair, the terror in Tyler's eyes when he described what happens when the frequency stops. I've driven past Black Rock twice since that night. Both times I've felt it, that deep, subaudible hum that you sense more than hear. Both times I've seen the lights in the windows of what's supposed to be an abandoned building. And both times I've kept driving, not stopping, not looking back, because some knowledge is too heavy to carry twice. The colonel called me once, about 2 months after the incident. He didn't identify himself, but I recognized his voice. Detective Johnson, I wanted to thank you for your discretion regarding the Black Rock matter. I did what seemed right. Yes, you did. I also wanted you to know that the situation is being managed. The maintenance crew is being well cared for. Their sacrifice is appreciated, even if it can never be publicly acknowledged. Sacrifice, and that's an interesting word choice. It's an accurate one. They've sacrificed their freedom, their health, potentially their sanity, to maintain something that protects us all. That makes them heroes in my book, even if no one will ever know their names. And when the generators finally fail, there was a long pause. We're working on alternatives, permanent solutions. The situation at Black Rock has taught us a great deal about the nature of these incursions. We're better prepared now. Incursions, plural. Detective, there are things in this world, or adjacent to it, that would terrify the average person into catatonia. The fact that you can walk around, do your job, live your life without constantly screaming in existential terror is because a small number of people stand watch at places like Black Rock. They maintain the barriers, keep the frequencies running, hold back things that should never have been discovered but, once found, can never be forgotten or ignored. And if one of those barriers fails, then we learn what humanity's role really is in the cosmic order. And I suspect we won't like the answer. He hung up after that, and I haven't heard from him since. But his words stay with me. Every time I respond to a call near an abandoned building, every time I hear about urban explorers finding something unusual, every time there's a report of strange sounds or unexplained phenomena, I wonder if it's another Black Rock. Another place where reality is thinner than it should be. Held together by nothing more than sound waves and the dedication of people whose sacrifice will never be acknowledged. The indigenous peoples were right. There are places on this earth that should be left alone, ground that shouldn't be disturbed, silences that shouldn't be broken. We didn't listen. We never do. We dig and explore and push boundaries, and sometimes we find things that make us wish we'd stayed ignorant. But we can't unknow what we know. We can't undiscover what we've discovered. All we can do is manage the consequences, maintain the barriers, and hope that the next generation is either wise enough to leave these things alone or smart enough to find better solutions than endless vigilance. Tyler's last email was different from the others. Usually, he sends technical updates, frequency readings, generator capacity reports. This time, it was personal. I've been thinking about that night, he wrote, about what you and Officer Thompson saw. Most people who experience what's under Black Rock don't walk away unchanged. Some go mad, some disappear. Some, like us, become guardians, whether we wanted to or not. You may have left the station, but you're still standing watch in your own way. Every time you don't talk about what really happened, every time you file a report that hides the truth, you're maintaining a different kind of barrier. One made of silence and secrets instead of sound waves. The frequency here is holding at 19.7 hertz. The entity sleeps. The world continues, unaware of how close it comes to ending every single day. But I can feel it sometimes, pressing against the barrier, testing for weaknesses. It's learning, adapting. What worked for 30 years might not work for another 30. If something happens, if the frequency stops and doesn't start again, you'll know. Everyone will know. It won't be subtle. The indigenous peoples had another name for this place, one the anthropologists didn't include in their official reports. They called it the first silence, the quiet that came before creation, before the world decided what it wanted to be. They believed that if it ever woke fully, it wouldn't destroy the world. It would undo it, unravel it back to that primordial silence. I don't know if they were right. I hope we never find out. But if we do, remember that you tried. Remember that for 6 months now, you've helped maintain the secret that keeps the world turning. That's more than most people ever do. The sun is setting here. The aurora is active tonight, green and gold ribbons across the sky. It's beautiful, even if I know it's just charged particles hitting the magnetosphere. Or maybe it's beautiful because of that, because even the universe's violence can create something worth watching. Stay safe, detective. And if you ever hear the frequency stop, don't try to be a hero. Just run. Run as far and as fast as you can and don't look back. Some things are too big for courage to matter. I keep that email saved in a folder marked personal. Sometimes I read it when I'm working late, when the station is quiet, and the only sound is the hum of electronics and the distant traffic on the highway. It reminds me that somewhere out there, in places the public will never know about, people like Tyler, Jordan, and Megan stand watch. They maintain frequencies, monitor barriers, and hold back things that defy our understanding of reality. They're heroes whose names will never be known, whose sacrifice will never be honored, whose story will never be told except in fragments and whispers and classified reports that gather dust in locked filing cabinets. They're the thin line between the world we know and the things that wait outside it, hungry and patient and older than time itself. The Black Rock radar station still appears on maps as a decommissioned federal facility, off limits to civilians, protected by fences and warning signs. The official story is environmental contamination, toxic materials from the Cold War era that make the site dangerous to human health. It's not entirely a lie. There is something toxic there, something dangerous to human health. It's just not chemical or biological. It's something that exists in frequencies we can barely perceive, in dimensions we can't fully access, in spaces between what is and what should never be. Every few weeks, a white van from Northern Environmental Services drives up the access road. The maintenance crew, there are more of them now, working in shifts to prevent the kind of prolonged exposure Tyler, Jordan, and Megan experienced, checks the generators, adjusts the frequency, and ensures that 19.7 Hertz continues to resonate through the bedrock, through the station, through the barrier that holds back the first silence. They're not environmental technicians. They're not maintenance workers. They're guardians, standing watch at the edge of the abyss, making sure that what lies
Beyond doesn't cross over into our world. They know what's at stake. They know what they're protecting us from. And they know that one day, maybe soon, maybe not for decades, the generators will fail, the frequency will stop, and the silence will return. When that happens, when the barriers finally fall and the things we've kept at bay for so long finally break through, we'll learn what our ancestors knew instinctively, that some ground is sacred not because gods walk there, but because monsters sleep there. And the only thing worse than finding a monster is waking one up. But until then, the frequency continues. 19.7 Hertz, too low to hear, too important to stop. It pulses through the earth like a heartbeat, a reminder that we're not alone in the universe. and that sometimes the best we can do is keep the other things out. I still work as a detective. I still respond to calls, investigate crimes, file reports. But now I know that the thin blue line we talk about isn't just between order and chaos in the human world. It's between our reality and others, between what we understand and what we desperately try not to. And sometimes, on quiet nights when I can almost feel that subsonic hum in my bones, I think about Tyler, Jordan, and Megan, sitting in their concrete bunker, watching screens, maintaining frequencies, and holding back the dark. They're still there. They'll always be there, as long as the generators hold, as long as the frequency continues, as long as someone remembers that the price of our ignorance is their eternal vigilance. The restricted zone around Black Rock has been expanded twice since our incident. The official reason is additional contamination discovered during routine inspections. The real reason, I suspect, is that the entity's influence is growing, that 19.7 Hertz is becoming less effective, that the barrier is weakening despite their best efforts. I've submitted requests to visit to check on Tyler and the others, but they're always denied. For your own safety, the rejection letters say, exposure to the environmental hazards at Black Rock Radar Station is strictly limited to essential personnel only. Essential personnel. That's what they call the people who keep the world from ending. Sometimes I dream about that night. Not nightmares exactly, but dreams where I'm back in the station, descending deeper than the 4 official sublevels, finding rooms that shouldn't exist, doors that open onto spaces that hurt to perceive. In the dreams, the frequency is louder, strong enough to feel in my chest, and I know that as long as I can feel it, I'm safe. But there's always a moment when it stops, when the silence rushes in like water through a broken dam, and in that silence, something vast and impossible begins to unfold itself into our reality. I wake up when that happens, heart racing, ears straining for a sound too low to hear. And sometimes, if I listen carefully enough, I can almost convince myself that I feel it. That 19.7 Hertz pulse that means the barrier holds, the entity sleeps, and the world continues for another day. Ashley called me last week, first time in months. She's doing better, she says. The nightmares have mostly stopped. She's working as a security consultant now, using her law enforcement experience in the private sector. But she called because she'd heard something, a rumor in certain circles that monitor unusual government activity. They're building something new at Black Rock, she said. Satellite images show construction, major construction. Underground mostly, but extensive. Maybe they're finally replacing the generators. Maybe. Or maybe they're preparing for something. Building a containment facility for when the current containment fails. I thought about that. About what kind of facility you'd build to contain something that exists partially outside our reality, something that responds to sound waves and threatens to unravel existence itself. Ashley, even if that's true, what can we do about it? Nothing, she admitted. Absolutely nothing. But I needed to tell someone who would understand. Someone who was there. We talked for a while about other things. Her new job, my recent cases, anything but Black Rock. But it was there between us. The shared knowledge of what lies beneath that abandoned radar station. The understanding that we'd touched something beyond human comprehension and walked away relatively intact. Before she hung up, she said something that stayed with me. Do you think they knew? The people who built the station originally? Do you think they chose that spot deliberately, knowing what was underneath? I've thought about that question every day since. The DEW line stations were supposedly positioned for optimal radar coverage, but what if that was just the cover story? What if someone, somehow, knew about these weak points in reality and built the stations not to watch for Soviet bombers, but to monitor and
Contain things far more dangerous? It would explain the over-engineering of the facilities, the massive concrete structures that seemed excessive for simple radar installations. It would explain why some stations were decommissioned while others, like Black Rock, were maintained despite having no obvious strategic value. It would explain a lot of things that never quite made sense about the Cold War's infrastructure projects. But it would also mean that someone, decades ago, knew about these entities and chose to build on top of them anyway. Either as an act of incredible courage or incredible hubris, they decided that humanity could contain these things, could hold them back with technology and vigilance and sacrifice. And so far, they've been right. So far, the barriers have held, the frequencies have continued, the entities have slept. But for how much longer? Tyler's emails have become less frequent, more cryptic. The last one contained only a single line. The silence is learning to sing. I don't know what that means, but it terrifies me more than anything else I've experienced since that night at Black Rock. Because if the entity is learning, adapting, finding ways around the frequency that's contained it for 30 years, then we're running out of time. And when that time runs out, when the last generator fails and the final frequency fades, we'll all learn what the indigenous peoples knew, what Tyler and Jordan and Megan discovered, what Ashley and I glimpsed that night in the station's depths. We'll learn what silence really sounds like, and God help us all when we do. The restricted zone around Black Rock extends exactly 4.7 miles in every direction from the main facility. I know because I've measured it, driven the perimeter during my off hours, trying to understand the geography of our secret. There are 17 access points, all monitored, all locked, all marked with the same federal warning signs. But if you know where to look, if you pay attention to the details others miss, you can see the real boundaries, the places where birds refuse to nest, where the grass grows in strange spiral patterns, where compass needles spin without purpose. I've become something of an expert on these anomalies. Not officially, of course. Officially, I'm just Detective Olivia Johnson, working regular cases, filing regular reports. But unofficially, I'm documenting everything connected to Black Rock and places like it. The patterns are there if you know how to look. 3 weeks after Ashley's call about the construction at Black Rock, I got another visitor. Not Colonel Harrison this time, but someone younger, civilian clothes but military bearing. She introduced herself as Dr. Rachel Park, theoretical physicist, working for a department she couldn't name on a project she couldn't discuss. Detective Johnson, I understand you were present during the Black Rock incident 6 months ago. I filed my report. Yes, you did. A very careful report. Very selective in its details. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I'm here because we need someone with your particular experience. Someone who's been exposed to the frequency and survived with their faculties intact. I'm not going back there. Not to Black Rock, no. But there's another site. Similar problem, different approach. We're calling it Resonance Point Beta. She spread a map on my desk, pointing to a location about 200 miles south. Another abandoned military installation, this one an old missile silo from the 1960s. We found it 3 months ago during a geological survey. The readings were familiar. The same kind of dimensional instability we see at Black Rock, but dormant, completely quiet. Then why do you need me? Because we want to activate it. I stared at her, certain I'd misheard. You want to wake up another one of those things? Not wake up. Control. We've learned a lot from Black Rock. The entity there is contained but not controlled. We're reactive, constantly maintaining a barrier that's slowly failing. But what if we could be proactive? What if we could establish the frequency before the entity fully manifests? That's insane. That's necessary. There are 17 known sites like Black Rock worldwide, 17 places where we're barely holding the line. In the next decade, we estimate at least 5 will experience critical containment failure. We need alternatives. She left me with a folder. Classified documents that I shouldn't have been allowed to see. Photos of other sites. Incident reports. Casualty lists. Black Rock wasn't unique. It wasn't even the worst. There was a site in Siberia where the entire containment crew had vanished overnight, leaving behind only their clothes arranged in perfect circles around the frequency generator. A site in Brazil where the entity had partially manifested before being contained, leaving 7 workers in permanent catatonic states, their minds apparently touching.
Something beyond human comprehension. But what caught my attention was a single paragraph in a report from 1952. Before Black Rock, before any of the modern containment protocols. It described an incident at a research station in Antarctica where scientists had detected an anomaly in the ice core samples, spaces that shouldn't exist, containing materials that didn't match any known element. When they tried to investigate further, 3 of the researchers began speaking in unison, in a language that had never been heard before but which everyone present somehow understood. They were describing the silence before existence, the void that preceded reality, and how it wanted to return. The research station was abandoned. The area was marked as off-limits, and 20 years later, when technology had advanced enough, they built a containment facility there. The first one. The prototype for all the others, including Black Rock. I've been thinking about that a lot lately. About how we keep finding these things, these weak points in reality. And instead of leaving them alone, we build on them. We contain them, monitor them, maintain them. But we never truly solve them. We're like the Dutch boy with his finger in the dike, except there are 17 holes, and we're running out of fingers. Tyler sent another email yesterday. This one was longer, more coherent, but somehow more disturbing. Detective, the frequency is holding, but barely. We've had to adjust it 3 times this week. Each time the entity resists a little more. It's like it's building an immunity to the sound, developing a tolerance. Dr. Flores thinks we have maybe 18 months before 19.7 Hertz stops working entirely. But that's not what I wanted to tell you. It's about Jordan. He's changed since that night. Not physically. The white hair is still there, but he's healthy otherwise. It's something else. He knows things he shouldn't know. Yesterday, he told Megan about her childhood pet, a rabbit named Chester that died when she was 7. He described it perfectly, down to the pattern of its spots. Megan never told anyone about Chester. Her family moved here from South Korea when she was 8. There's no way Jordan could have known. He says the entity shows him things when the frequency weakens. Not visions exactly, but knowledge. Information that exists in the spaces between sounds, in the gaps where the frequency doesn't quite reach. He knows what happened to the missing containment crew in Siberia. They're not dead, just displaced, existing in a state between here and there. He knows why animals avoid these sites. They can sense the wrongness, the places where reality is thin. He knows what the entity actually is. He won't tell us everything. Says we're not ready. But he did say one thing that I can't stop thinking about. The entities aren't invaders. They're not from somewhere else trying to get here. They're from here, from before here was here. We're the invaders. We're the ones who don't belong. And every time we use our technology to push them back, to contain them, we're only delaying the inevitable restoration of the natural order. I don't know if I believe him. I don't know if he believes himself. But when he talks about it, his eyes go distant, and I swear I can hear the frequency fluctuate, like the entity is listening through him. Megan's coordinates are mapping something, I've been plotting them, and they form a pattern. Not random locations, but specific points that, when connected, create a geometric shape I don't recognize. 17 points so far, matching the 17 known sites. But she keeps adding new ones, coordinates for places we haven't found yet, or maybe places that haven't manifested yet. The construction you heard about is real. They're building a new type of containment system, something that doesn't rely on frequency alone. I've seen the plans. It's beautiful and terrible. A massive resonance chamber that will theoretically create a pocket dimension, a bubble of reality where we can trap the entity completely. But to activate it, they need to let the current containment fail. They need to let the entity partially manifest so they can capture it. They're planning to do it during the winter solstice when the dimensional barriers are supposedly weakest. I think they're insane. I think they're going to get us all killed. But I'm going to be here when they try, because someone needs to document what happens. Someone needs to record the truth, even if there's no one left to read it. Stay away from Black Rock, Detective. Whatever happens, whatever you hear, don't come back. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. Tyler, I've read that email dozens of times. Each time I notice something new. The way he capitalizes certain words. The pattern of his paragraphs. It's like there's a message hidden in the message. Something he's trying to tell me without actually saying it. Or something beyond human comprehension. But what caught my attention was a single paragraph in a report from 1952. Before Black Rock, before any of the modern containment protocols. It described an incident at a research station in Antarctica where scientists had detected an anomaly in the ice core samples, spaces that shouldn't exist, containing materials that didn't match any known element. When they tried to investigate further, 3 of the researchers began speaking in unison, in a language that had never been heard before but which everyone present somehow understood. They were describing the silence before existence, the void that preceded reality, and how it wanted to return. The research station was abandoned. The area was marked as off-limits, and 20 years later, when technology had advanced enough, they built a containment facility there. The first one. The prototype for all the others, including Black Rock. I've been thinking about that a lot lately. About how we keep finding these things, these weak points in reality. And instead of leaving them alone, we build on them. We contain them, monitor them, maintain them. But we never truly solve them. We're like the Dutch boy with his finger in the dike, except there are 17 holes, and we're running out of fingers. Tyler sent another email yesterday. This one was longer, more coherent, but somehow more disturbing. Detective, the frequency is holding, but barely. We've had to adjust it 3 times this week. Each time the entity resists a little more. It's like it's building an immunity to the sound. Developing a tolerance. Dr. Flores thinks we have maybe 18 months before 19.7 Hertz stops working entirely. But that's not what I wanted to tell you. It's about Jordan. He's changed since that night. Not physically. The white hair is still there, but he's healthy otherwise. It's something else. He knows things he shouldn't know. Yesterday, he told Megan about her childhood pet. A rabbit named Chester that died when she was 7. He described it perfectly, down to the pattern of its spots. Megan never told anyone about Chester. Her family moved here from South Korea when she was 8. There's no way Jordan could have known. He says the entity shows him things when the frequency weakens. Not visions exactly, but knowledge. Information that exists in the spaces between sounds, in the gaps where the frequency doesn't quite reach. He knows what happened to the missing containment crew in Siberia. They're not dead, just displaced, existing in a state between here and there. He knows why animals avoid these sites. They can sense the wrongness, the places where reality is thin. He knows what the entity actually is. He won't tell us everything, says we're not ready. But he did say one thing that I can't stop thinking about. The entities aren't invaders. They're not from somewhere else trying to get here. They're from here, from before here was here. We're the invaders. We're the ones who don't belong. And every time we use our technology to push them back, to contain them, we're only delaying the inevitable restoration of the natural order. I don't know if I believe him. I don't know if he believes himself. But when he talks about it, his eyes go distant, and I swear I can hear the frequency fluctuate, like the entity is listening through him. Megan's coordinates are mapping something. I've been plotting them, and they form a pattern. Not random locations, but specific points that, when connected, create a geometric shape I don't recognize. 17 points so far, matching the 17 known sites. But she keeps adding new ones, coordinates for places we haven't found yet, or maybe places that haven't manifested yet. The construction you heard about is real. They're building a new type of containment system, something that doesn't rely on frequency alone. I've seen the plans. It's beautiful and terrible. A massive resonance chamber that will theoretically create a pocket dimension, a bubble of reality where we can trap the entity completely. But to activate it, they need to let the current containment fail. They need to let the entity partially manifest so they can capture it. They're planning to do it during the winter solstice when the dimensional barriers are supposedly weakest. I think they're insane. I think they're going to get us all killed. But I'm going to be here when they try, because someone needs to document what happens. Someone needs to record the truth, even if there's no one left to read it. Stay away from BlackRock, Detective. Whatever happens, whatever you hear, don't come back. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. Tyler. I've read that email dozens of times. Each time I notice something new. The way he capitalizes certain words. The pattern of his paragraphs. It's like there's a message hidden in the message. Something he's trying to tell me without actually saying it. Or
Maybe I'm just seeing patterns where none exist. A common symptom of exposure to dimensional anomalies. Dr. Park visited again last week. This time, she brought a device. A small metal box that hummed at a frequency I could feel in my teeth. Personal frequency generator, she explained, based on what we've learned from BlackRock. It won't stop a full manifestation, but it might buy you a few minutes if you ever encounter an uncontained entity. Why are you giving this to me? Because you're already involved whether you want to be or not. The exposure at BlackRock changed you, Detective. You're sensitive to dimensional fluctuations now. You can feel when reality gets thin. That makes you valuable. Or vulnerable. Both. That's why we need you to carry this, and why we need you to report anything unusual. Any dreams that feel too real. Any moments where you know things you shouldn't know. Any sensations of being watched by something that isn't there. I didn't tell her that I'd been experiencing all of those things for months. The dreams where I'm walking through BlackRock, but it's infinitely larger, with corridors that lead to other times and places. The sudden knowledge of facts I've never learned, languages I've never studied. The feeling, especially at 3:47 a.m., always exactly 3:47 a.m., that something vast and patient is observing me through dimensions I can't perceive. I didn't tell her, but I think she knew. They're monitoring all of us who've been exposed. Ashley, Marcus, me, probably others from incidents I don't know about. We're data points in their research, canaries in the cosmic coal mine. But I've been doing my own research too, going through old newspapers, police records, missing person reports, looking for patterns everyone else missed. And I've found something interesting. Every location where an entity has manifested has a history. Not just regular history, but specific incidents. Unexplained disappearances, reports of strange sounds, areas that people instinctively avoided long before anyone built anything there. The indigenous peoples knew. They always knew. They marked these places in their stories, their warnings, their sacred geography. But we didn't listen. We built our military bases and research stations and radar facilities right on top of their warnings. And now we're surprised when things go wrong. I've been corresponding with a professor of indigenous studies at the university, Dr. Lisa Crowfeather. She's Anishinaabe, like the people who originally warned about Black Rock. She told me something that changed my perspective on everything. In our tradition, these places aren't cursed or evil. They're doorways, transition points between states of being. The entities you're encountering aren't monsters. They're the universe trying to remember what it was before it decided to be a universe. And every time you force them back with your frequencies and your containment fields, you're preventing a natural process, like trying to stop the tide with your hands. So, we should just let them through, I asked. No, because we're here now, and we have a right to exist too. But maybe instead of containment, you should be thinking about coexistence. Maybe instead of frequencies that force them to sleep, you should be looking for harmonies that let both realities exist without destroying each other. It sounds impossible, but then, so does everything else about this situation. 2 nights ago, I drove out to the perimeter of Black Rock. Not to the facility itself, just to the edge of the restricted zone. I parked on a hill that overlooks the area and turned off my engine. In the darkness, I could see lights at the facility, more than usual. The construction Dr. Park mentioned is definitely happening. Heavy equipment, prefab structures, things that suggest a major operation. But what struck me most was the aurora. The northern lights were active that night, sheets of green and blue dancing across the sky. But directly over Black Rock, they behaved differently. Instead of flowing curtains of light, they formed geometric patterns, triangles, hexagons, shapes that hurt to look at directly. And in the center of those patterns, a darkness that wasn't just the absence of light, but the presence of something else. I watched for 3 hours. During that time, I saw things I can't fully explain. Shadows moving against the wind. Lights in the sky that weren't planes or satellites, and once, just for a moment, I saw the facility as it really is, not a building but a scar, a wound in reality held closed by nothing more than sound and willpower. When I finally drove home, my radio picked up a transmission that shouldn't have been there. It was Tyler's voice, but distorted, stretched. The silence is learning to sing, and its song is the truth of what we are. I've been thinking about that phrase. The silence is learning to sing. What if yesterday, I got a call from Marcus. We hadn't spoken since that night at Black Rock, but he'd been doing his own investigation. He'd found something in the federal archives, a document from 1943, classified beyond anything we should have access to. It described an incident during the Manhattan Project, not related to nuclear weapons, but to something they found while digging the tunnels at Los Alamos. A chamber that didn't match the geology, containing inscriptions in a language that predated human civilization, but which the scientists could somehow read. The inscriptions described a cosmic cycle, periods of noise and periods of silence, creation and uncreation, existence and void. According to the translation, we're living in a period of noise, a temporary disruption in the natural silence of the universe. The entities aren't trying to destroy our world. They're trying to restore the original state, the silence that existed before the Big Bang, before time, before anything. But here's the part that really disturbed me. The inscriptions suggested that this has happened before. many times. Universes rising from the silence, existing for cosmic moments, then returning to silence. And each time, at the end, there are those who try to maintain the noise, to prevent the return to silence. They always fail, but their attempts leave traces, scars in the void that become the seeds of the next universe. Are we just another iteration? Another group of beings desperately trying to maintain our noise against the inevitable return of silence? I don't have answers. No one does. But I've made a decision. I'm going to accept Dr. Park's offer to visit Resonance Point Beta. Not because I think their plan will work, but because I need to understand. I need to know if we're fighting the right battle, if containment is salvation or just delayed destruction. Tyler sent one more email this morning. Just 2 words. Winter solstice. That's 3 weeks away. 3 weeks until they attempt their new containment protocol at Blackrock. 3 weeks until they deliberately let the entity partially manifest. 3 weeks until we find out if we're scientists or fools, heroes, or the universe's attempt at prolonging a joke that should have ended long ago. I'm scared. More scared than I was that night at Blackrock when reality cracked and something impossible tried to crawl through. Because now I understand what we're really fighting, and I'm not sure it's a fight we can win. Maybe it's not even a fight we should win. But I think about Tyler, Jordan, and Megan sitting in their concrete tomb, maintaining the frequency that holds back the silence. I think about all the others, at all the other sites, unknown heroes fighting an unwinnable war against the fundamental nature of reality itself. And I know I can't walk away. None of us can. Because even if we're just noise in the cosmic silence, even if we're temporary and ultimately doomed, we're here now. We exist, we think, we feel, we love, we fear. And maybe that's enough. Maybe maintaining the noise for just one more day, one more year, one more generation is worth everything we sacrifice. The personal frequency generator Dr. Park gave me sits on my nightstand. Every night I fall asleep to its hum, 19.7 hertz, the sound that keeps the monsters at bay. But sometimes, in the moments between sleep and waking, I hear another frequency underneath it. Older, deeper, the universe's original tone. And in those moments I understand what Tyler meant. The silence isn't learning to sing. It's always been singing. We just convinced ourselves that our noise was music and its song was void. But they're both just vibrations in something larger than either sound or silence, order or chaos, existence or void. We're all standing watch at the edges of reality, maintaining frequencies we don't fully understand, holding back things we can't truly comprehend. And maybe that's the most human thing of all. Standing guard against the dark. Not because we can win, but because standing guard is what we do. Tomorrow, I drive to Resonance Point Beta. I'll meet Dr. Park's team, see their new containment system, learn about their plans to control rather than simply contain. Part of me hopes they succeed. Part of me fears what success might mean. Because every time we think we've mastered these forces, they show us how little we really understand. But I'll go. I'll observe, I'll document. Because that's my role now, the job I never applied for but can't resign from. I'm a witness to the places where our world touches others, where our reality thins and threatens to break. I'm a guardian of secrets that would drive most people mad, a keeper of truths that should never be spoken. And somewhere out there, in an abandoned radar station on the Canadian border, Tyler, Jordan, and Megan continue their vigil. The frequency continues, the entity sleeps, the world spins on, unaware of how fragile it all is. For 20 years, the warehouse district in Harrisonville had been lifeless, but no one expected it to take anyone with it. That changed when we received news of a burglary at the old Excelsior chemical storage facility, which had been locked, sealed, and forgotten since that cold November morning in 2001. My name is Daniel Brooks, and I've been with the Harrisonville PD for 8 years. Before that, I did 4 years in the military police, so I thought I'd seen my share of hazardous situations. But military training prepares you for known dangers: chemical weapons, biological agents, things with protocols and procedures. It doesn't prepare you for what we found in that warehouse. The call came in at 6:23 a.m. from a security company that monitored the facility remotely. Motion sensors had triggered in Building C, which was supposedly sealed tighter than a drum. My partner, Officer Brianna Cooper, picked me up in her squad car, coffee still steaming in the cup holders. "Excelsior Chemical," she said, shaking her head. "That place has been locked down since before I joined the force. Why would anyone break in there? I'd wondered the same thing." The facility had been abandoned after Excelsior went bankrupt following a series of lawsuits. They'd produced industrial solvents, cleaning agents, nothing particularly valuable. The EPA had supervised the cleanup, certified it safe, and the whole complex had been sitting empty ever since, waiting for someone to buy the land and tear it down. The drive to the facility took us through the old industrial sector, past dozens of similar abandoned structures. Each one had its own story of economic collapse, environmental disaster, or simple obsolescence. But none of them had the reputation of Excelsior. Even before its closure, workers had reported strange incidents: equipment operating on its own, chemical reactions that shouldn't have been possible, areas of the facility where compasses spun wildly and electronics failed without explanation. The facility sat on 40 acres of cracked asphalt and dead grass, surrounded by a 12-foot fence topped with rust-colored barbed wire. 5 buildings total, each the size of an airplane hangar, their metal siding oxidized to the color of dried blood. The main gate was still locked when we arrived, but we found the breach quickly enough. A section of fence near Building C had been cut with professional precision. "Look at this," Brianna pointed to tracks in the frost-covered ground. "Wheeled something heavy through here. Dolly, maybe a cart." But there was something else, something that made me pause. Next to the wheel tracks were footprints, but they had an odd quality to them. Some seemed deeper than physics should allow given the frozen ground, while others barely left any impression at all, as if the people making them had variable weight, or didn't quite interact with the earth the same way normal people did. The tracks led directly to Building C's loading dock, where we found the real surprise. The door wasn't just broken, it had been opened with a key. The original Excelsior lock had been removed and replaced with a new one, which now hung open. "Someone has access," I said, examining the lock. "This isn't a break-in. It's an unauthorized entry by someone who thinks they have a right to be here." The lock itself was unusual. The metal had a shimmer to it that seemed to shift depending on the angle of view, and touching it left my fingers tingling with a sensation that wasn't quite electrical, but wasn't quite anything else either. Brianna noticed it too, pulling her hand back quickly after examining it. The inside of Building C was exactly what you'd expect from 2 decades of abandonment. Rust, rot, and the peculiar silence that comes from places humans have forgotten. Our flashlights cut through the darkness, revealing rows of empty chemical storage racks stretching to the ceiling. The concrete floor was stained with the ghosts of old spills, creating an abstract map of past accidents. But something was wrong with the picture. Too many footprints in the dust going in different directions from different times. Some were fresh, maybe hours old. Others had been there for days, weeks even. Someone had been coming here regularly, and more disturbing, some of the footprint patterns didn't make sense. They would start in the middle of the floor with no trail leading to them, or end abruptly, as if the person making them had simply ceased to exist mid-step. "Police! Anyone in here needs to identify themselves." My voice echoed off the metal walls, coming back distorted and hollow. The echo lasted too long. I counted 8 repetitions of my voice bouncing back, but the building wasn't large enough for that many echoes. The last few sounded different too, as if they were coming from somewhere else entirely, somewhere that occupied the same space but wasn't quite the same place. We followed the freshest tracks deeper into the building, past safety shower stations whose pipes had long since run dry, past eye-wash stations covered in spider webs. The tracks led to a section of the warehouse that should have been empty but wasn't. Barrels, dozens of them, industrial blue with fresh labels, arranged in neat rows. The labels bore chemical names I didn't recognize and hazard diamonds indicating corrosive materials. But what made my skin crawl was the inventory sheet tacked to a clipboard hanging on the wall. Dated 3 days ago, signed by someone named Gabriel Flores, environmental safety inspector. The signature itself was wrong. It seemed to shift and change each time I looked at it, sometimes appearing to be in English, sometimes in scripts I didn't recognize, sometimes in patterns that weren't quite writing at all but conveyed meaning nonetheless. "This doesn't make sense," Brianna said, checking her phone. "EPA says this place was cleaned out in 2001. There shouldn't be anything here." I photographed the inventory sheet, noting the discrepancies immediately. According to the official EPA records we'd pulled up, Building C had housed 400 barrels of industrial solvent before cleanup. The cleanup report showed all 400 barrels removed and destroyed. But this new inventory showed 447 barrels currently in storage. "There are more barrels here now than there were originally," I said. "Someone's been using this place as illegal storage." I examined one of the barrels more closely. The label read, "Polydimensional Solvent Kappa 9, with warnings I'd never seen before. Caution. Maintains coherence only in standard spacetime. Do not expose to temporal fluctuations. Keep away from paradoxes." The hazard diamond showed a symbol that seemed to move, shifting between a standard corrosive warning and something that hurt to look at directly. A sound from deeper in the warehouse stopped our speculation. Metal on concrete, like a barrel being moved. We drew our weapons, moving carefully between the rows. The sound came again, closer, followed by footsteps. Not trying to hide, not running, just walking steadily toward us. "Police! Come out with your hands visible." A man emerged from the shadows, middle-aged, wearing a hazmat suit with the hood pulled back. He had a clipboard in one hand and looked genuinely surprised to see us. But there was something off about him. His shadow didn't quite match his movements, lagging behind by a fraction of a second, and his eyes reflected light in a way that human eyes shouldn't. "Officers? What are you doing here?" His accent was slight but noticeable, Eastern European maybe. "We could ask you the same thing. Identify yourself." "Noah Carter, environmental contractor." He pulled out an ID badge. "I'm conducting the monthly inventory for the property management company." The ID badge was real enough, but like everything else in this place, it had that quality of wrongness. The photo showed Noah's face, but from angles that shouldn't have been possible with a single camera. The text seemed to be in English, but reading it gave me a headache, as if my brain was translating something that wasn't quite language. "What property management company?" Brianna asked. "This place is abandoned." Noah's confusion seemed genuine. "Abandoned? No. Meridian Holdings owns this facility. I've been doing inspections here for 3 years. 3 years? I pressed. You've been coming to an abandoned chemical plant for 3 years and never questioned it." He hesitated, and for a moment his face showed genuine bewilderment. I never thought about it that way. It just seemed normal, like this was how it was supposed to be. He looked around as if seeing the decay and abandonment for the first time. "But that doesn't make sense, does it? Why didn't I notice? I ran the name through our database. Meridian Holdings existed, but they owned shopping centers and office buildings, not abandoned chemical storage facilities. When I called their corporate office, they'd never heard of the Excelsior facility, and certainly hadn't hired any environmental contractors." Noah's face went pale as the reality set in. "But I have work orders. Contracts. I've been paid every month." "By who?" "Direct deposit from Meridian Holdings. At least that's what it says on my bank statements." We detained Noah for questioning and called for backup to secure the scene. That's when things started to get complicated. The EPA had no record of any post-cleanup activity at the site. The State Environmental Agency showed the place as abandoned. The City Planning Office had it slated for demolition in 2003, but the demolition had been postponed indefinitely with no explanation. While we waited for backup, I noticed something else strange. My phone showed full signal strength, but when I tried to make calls, they would connect to wrong numbers. Not random wrong numbers, but specific ones. The same pizza place in Detroit, the same woman in Seattle who insisted I had the wrong number, the same automated message in a language I couldn't identify. Brianna's phone did the same thing, but with different wrong numbers. But Noah had proof of his employment. Contracts, work orders, inspection reports going back 3 years. All of it looked legitimate, except none of the authorizing agencies existed. The phone numbers led to disconnected lines. The email addresses bounced back. The physical addresses were parking lots or vacant buildings. "Someone's been running a shadow operation," I told my captain that afternoon. "Using this place for illegal chemical storage while creating a paper trail that looks real but leads nowhere. Toxic waste dumping? Maybe. But why create such an elaborate cover? Why hire legitimate contractors to inspect illegal barrels?" The captain, Marcus Rodriguez, was a 20-year veteran who'd seen everything from gang wars to serial killers. But even he seemed unsettled by what we were describing. "And these chemicals that don't exist?" "That's the thing, Captain. They don't exist in any database we can access, but the documentation is incredibly detailed. Chemical formulas that use elements not on the periodic table, safety procedures for hazards we don't have categories for, transportation logs showing shipments to coordinates that don't correspond to any location on Earth." The captain approved a full investigation. We got warrants, brought in the EPA, state investigators, even the FBI's Environmental Crimes Unit. What we found over the next few days defied explanation. The barrels in Building C weren't just illegal storage, they were impossible storage. The chemicals listed on the labels, compounds with names like tetramethyl substrate 7 and binary catalyst Q9, didn't exist in any chemical database. The hazard diamonds showed danger levels that weren't part of the standard system. And when the EPA tried to take samples, they found the barrels were sealed with a mechanism nobody could identify or open. Dr. Patricia Sullivan from the EPA spent 6 hours trying to open just one barrel. "The seal isn't mechanical," she reported, frustrated and exhausted. "It's not chemical either. It's like the concept of closed has been applied to these barrels at a fundamental level. They're not just sealed. They exist in a state where opening them is literally impossible within our understanding of physics." But that wasn't the strangest part. When we examined the other buildings, we found more inconsistencies. Building A which had supposedly stored acids, showed no signs of the extensive corrosion damage documented in the 2001 cleanup report. Building B had structural modifications that weren't on any blueprint. Reinforced walls, drainage systems that led nowhere, ventilation shafts that didn't connect to the outside. The ventilation shafts were particularly disturbing. They ran through the walls in patterns that defied three-dimensional logic. Following them with a fiber optic camera, we found that they seemed to connect to spaces that couldn't exist within the building's structure. The camera would show empty rooms that were larger than the building itself, corridors that turned in directions that weren't up, down, left, right, forward, or backward. Building D was locked from the inside. We had to cut through the door, and when we did, we found a fully operational office. Computers humming, coffee still warm in a mug, papers dated from the current week. But no people. The security footage from the hidden cameras we found showed employees working normally until 6:15 a.m., exactly 8 minutes before the motion sensors triggered. Then, in a single frame, they were gone. Not leaving, not hiding, just gone. The office itself was a study in the uncanny. Everything looked normal at first glance, but prolonged observation revealed the wrongness. Desk drawers that opened to spaces larger than the desks themselves. Computer monitors displaying information in languages that morphed and changed as you watched. A water cooler that never ran dry despite no one refilling it, dispensing liquid that looked like water but had properties water shouldn't have. The computers were the key to understanding what we'd stumbled into. They contained thousands of files, shipping manifests, inspection reports, correspondence. All of it related to the storage and transportation of chemicals that didn't exist, to and from companies that didn't exist, authorized by agencies that didn't exist. But the financial records were real. Money flowing in and out, millions of dollars, all properly taxed and accounted for. The IRS had records of Excelsior Chemical Storage Incorporated, not the defunct Excelsior Chemical Company, paying taxes for 20 years after the facility was supposedly abandoned. They were listed as a legitimate business with legitimate revenue from legitimate customers. Except none of the customers existed either. I spent days going through the files with Brianna and a forensic accountant the FBI brought in, a sharp-eyed woman named Jennifer Martinez, who'd unraveled some of the most complex financial crimes in the country, but even she was stumped. "This isn't money laundering," she said, staring at spreadsheets that seemed to change when you weren't looking directly at them. "This is something else. The money is real, the taxes are real, but the entire context is fabricated. It's like someone created an entire economic ecosystem that interfaces with ours, but exists independently of it. The deeper we dug, the less sense it made. Work orders for chemicals that couldn't be manufactured. Shipping records for deliveries to addresses that were geographic coordinates in the middle of empty fields. Safety inspections passed by inspectors who had real licenses but no memory of ever visiting the site. One shipping manifest particularly stood out. It showed a delivery of temporal flux stabilizer compound Delta 4 to coordinates that, when mapped, were 500 feet above the ground in the middle of nowhere in Nebraska. The delivery was confirmed as received, signed for by someone named Marcus Thompson. We found Marcus Thompson. He was a farmer who'd never left his hometown in Iowa, and certainly hadn't been floating in midair in Nebraska to receive chemical shipments. Then we found the employee records. 47 people were listed as current employees of Excelsior Chemical Storage Incorporated. Full names, social security numbers, addresses, phone numbers. All of it checked out. These were real people with real lives. The problem was, none of them knew they worked there. We tracked down a dozen of them. They were teachers, retail workers, retired, unemployed. normal people living normal lives. But according to the records, they came to work every day at the Excelsior facility. They had time cards, performance reviews, even disciplinary records. One woman, a kindergarten teacher named Sarah Kim, was listed as the night shift supervisor. She'd never heard of Excelsior and had certainly never set foot in Harrisonville. When we interviewed Sarah Kim via video call, something strange happened. For a brief moment, we could see another version of her in the background, wearing a hazmat suit, checking gauges on equipment that shouldn't exist. She didn't see it, but Brianna and I both did. When we played back the recording, that moment showed only static. Someone's using their identities, Brianna suggested. But it was more complex than identity theft. These people's lives were being lived in parallel. While Sarah Kim taught kindergarten in Portland, her doppelganger was supervising chemical storage in Harrisonville. While Marcus Washington worked as an accountant in Detroit, his shadow self was driving forklift for Excelsior. They existed in two places at once, living two lives, with only one of them aware of it. We brought in Dr. Raymond Blackwood, a theoretical physicist from the nearby university, who consulted with law enforcement on unusual cases. He spent 3 days studying our findings before offering his hypothesis. "What if," he said slowly, "these aren't separate people, but the same people existing in parallel states?" Quantum mechanics suggests the possibility of superposition, particles existing in multiple states simultaneously until observed. What if something similar is happening here with entire human beings? "That's science fiction," the captain said. "So is everything else about this case," Blackwood replied. "Look at the evidence. These people are living their normal lives while simultaneously working at a facility that both does and doesn't exist, handling chemicals that can't exist in our understanding of chemistry. This isn't crime. It's a fundamental violation of how we understand reality." The investigation expanded. We brought in Homeland Security, the CDC, anyone who might make sense of what we were finding. Teams in hazmat suits tried to analyze the mysterious barrels, but every attempt failed. The sealing mechanism defied physics. It wasn't locked or welded or glued, it simply wouldn't open, as if the concept of opening didn't apply to it. Then, 2 weeks into the investigation, we found Building E. There was no Building E on any map, any blueprint, any record. But there it was, hidden behind a facade of weathered metal siding that perfectly matched the decay of the other buildings. We only found it because one of the EPA techs noticed his radiation detector spiking near what should have been empty space between Building C and D. The tech, David Park, was a 20-year veteran who'd worked Chernobyl, Fukushima, and dozens of contaminated sites. "This isn't radiation," he said, studying his instruments. "It's reading as radiation, but the spectrum is all wrong. It's like something is radiating on frequencies that our instruments interpret as radiation, but isn't actually radioactive." Building E was underground. The entrance was concealed beneath a shipping container that had been welded to the ground. When we cut through, we found stairs leading down into darkness. The walls were concrete, but not normal concrete. It had a crystalline quality that made it semi-translucent. You could see shapes moving within the walls, like shadows swimming through stone. The radiation levels were high, but not dangerous. Other readings were wrong too. Electromagnetic fields that pulsed in patterns. Temperature fluctuations that followed no natural law. Gravitational anomalies that made everyone dizzy. We sent in a robot first, but it stopped transmitting after 30 feet. When we pulled it back, its circuits had been fused into geometric patterns that looked almost artistic. The patterns were beautiful and disturbing. They resembled circuit boards, but also organic nervous systems, but also stellar constellations, but also mathematical equations rendered in three-dimensional form. Looking at them too long caused headaches and nosebleeds. "We need to evacuate," the EPA team leader said. "This is beyond environmental hazard. This is... I don't know what this is, but I had to know." The detective in me couldn't walk away from a mystery this deep. Against all protocol, I volunteered to go down with a minimal team. Just me, Brianna, and 2 FBI agents in the best hazmat gear available. The FBI agents were Sarah Foster and James Kellerman, both from the Bureau's Unusual Phenomena Division, a department whose existence was barely acknowledged even within the FBI. They'd investigated everything from mass hallucinations to objects that fell from the sky with no explanation. "This reminds me of the Seattle overlap," Foster said as we prepared to descend. 2018 entire city block existed in 2 states simultaneously for 6 hours. We never did figure out what caused it. The descent into Building E was like traveling through layers of reality. Each level down, and there were 5 that we counted, the wrongness intensified. Our instruments gave readings that shouldn't be possible. Time moved differently. Our synchronized watches showed different times despite being in the same place. Brianna's moved faster, mine slower, and one of the FBI agents stopped entirely. The stairwell itself was wrong. We counted 47 steps between the first and second level, but only 23 steps when we tried to go back up. The third level required us to walk down 100 steps, but the vertical distance traveled was maybe 20 feet. Gravity seemed negotiable, pulling us in directions that weren't quite down. On the third level, we found the first workspace. It looked like a normal office, except everything was slightly wrong. Desks that weren't quite rectangular, chairs with too many legs, computers that had no visible screens, but somehow displayed information directly into your mind when you looked at them. The information was inventory data, the same chemicals from Building C, but with additional properties listed. Properties like temporal coefficient and dimensional saturation and consciousness index. I tried to use one of the computers. The moment I touched what might have been a keyboard, information flooded into my mind, not through my eyes or ears, but directly into my consciousness. I saw new, felt shipping schedules that extended into the past and future simultaneously. Inventory lists of items that existed in probability rather than actuality. Safety protocols for handling substances that could unmake reality if improperly stored. The fourth level was storage, but not like Building C. These weren't barrels but containers that hurt to look at directly. They existed in 3 dimensions but cast shadows in 4. Some were full of liquids that flowed upward. Others contained solids that passed through each other without interacting. One held what looked like crystallized time. I can't explain it better than that. Brianna tried to photograph one of the containers. Her camera captured something, but when we looked at the image, it showed the container from angles that the camera hadn't been positioned at. In one photo, we could see ourselves from behind, taking the photo, even though there was no mirror or reflective surface. The 5th level was where we found them. The employees. The real employees of Excelsior Chemical Storage Incorporated. They were working at stations that couldn't exist, monitoring processes that violated physics, recording data about chemicals that weren't just impossible but antithetical to reality as we understood it. They looked human, mostly, but when they turned to face us, their eyes reflected too many dimensions. They smiled with mouths that had the right shape, but the wrong topology. "You're early," one of them said. It might have been the shadow version of Sarah Kim, but faces were hard to focus on down there. The shipment isn't due for another 7 years. Her voice came from her mouth, but also from the walls, from our own thoughts, from directions that didn't have names. When she spoke, I could taste colors and see sounds, synesthesia taken to impossible extremes. Shipment of what? I managed to ask. The stabilizers, of course. To repair the damage from the last incursion. This reality is particularly fragile, you know. Requires constant maintenance. They thought we were customers, or suppliers, or something else that made sense in their context, but not in ours. They showed us around like it was a normal tour, pointing out features that our minds couldn't quite process. Storage areas that existed in the past but were accessible in the present. Processing equipment that turned possibility into actuality. Quality control systems that ensured chemicals maintained their properties across parallel timelines. One of them, who might have been Noah Carter's shadow, or might have been someone else entirely, demonstrated a piece of equipment. This validates the consistency of causality, he explained, adjusting controls that weren't quite there. Without it, cause and effect become negotiable, and you can imagine what that does to a reality's stability. How long has this been here? Brianna asked. Always and never, was the answer. We exist in the gaps, maintaining the infrastructure that keeps your reality stable. Every world needs its custodians. They explained, in terms we could barely comprehend, that reality wasn't as solid as we thought. It leaked, overlapped, contradicted itself. Left alone, it would collapse into paradox. So they existed, beings from the spaces between spaces, maintaining the chemical balance of existence itself. The facility above was just a mask, a way to interface with our world without disturbing it. Think of reality as a chemical reaction, Sarah Kim's shadow explained, her words creating visual representations in the air that hurt to perceive. It needs constant balancing, constant adjustment. Too much causality and everything becomes predetermined. Too little and nothing connects to anything else. We maintain the balance. The barrels in Building C weren't storing chemicals. They were storing concepts, ideas, possibilities that had been removed from our reality because they were too dangerous, too destabilizing. The shadow employees weren't stolen identities but parallel selves, versions from realities where they had chosen different paths. Every decision, one of them explained, creates a branching. Most branches wither and die, reabsorbed into the main timeline, but some persist, creating parallel tracks. We harvest those tracks, use them to reinforce weak points in the primary reality. But why here? I asked. Why Harrisonville? Every reality has weak points, Sarah Kim's shadow explained, places where the barriers are thin. This location has been a weak point for millennia. The indigenous peoples knew it. They called it the broken ground. The chemical company built here by accident, but their work weakened the barriers further. We've been repairing the damage ever since. She showed us a map, though map isn't quite the right word. It was a three-dimensional representation that kept adding dimensions as we watched, showing the facility's location as a nexus point where dozens of realities touched. The original Excelsior Chemical Company had unknowingly built their facility at one of the most unstable points in the entire reality matrix. The chemicals they produced, she continued, particularly batch 47 alpha in 1998, created resonances that threatened to tear open the barriers entirely. We had to intervene. The bankruptcy, the cleanup, the abandonment, all of it was orchestrated to stop the damage before it became irreversible. They offered to show us the repair process, but looking at their equipment made my nose bleed. Brianna collapsed when she tried to understand a diagram that existed in 7 dimensions. The FBI agent's instruments started screaming warnings about radiation that didn't exist on any known spectrum. Agent Kellerman managed to ask one more question before we had to leave. Are there others? Other facilities like this? Thousands, came the answer. Every major city, every weak point, every place where reality needs reinforcement. You've walked past them every day of your lives and never noticed. The abandoned factory that never gets demolished. The warehouse that's always locked but somehow still has fresh tire tracks. The office building with lights on floors that shouldn't exist. We're everywhere, maintaining everything. We retreated, but they followed us to the stairway. You can't report this, they said, and it wasn't a threat, but a statement of fact. Your reality doesn't have the conceptual framework to process what we are. Trying to explain it would cause more damage than we could repair. People need to know, I insisted. Know what? That their reality requires constant maintenance. That there are beings living in their shadows, keeping the universe from unraveling. That would help no one and harm everyone. They were right, and I hated that they were right. We emerged from Building E to find the surface operation in chaos. The EPA teams were evacuating, their instruments going haywire. The hazmat teams were reporting hallucinations. Someone had called in the National Guard. But then, as suddenly as it had all started, it stopped. The readings normalized, the hallucinations ended, and when we looked back, Building E was gone. Not destroyed, not hidden, just gone, as if it had never existed. The space between Building C and D was exactly what it should be. Empty ground with 20 years of undisturbed dust. The investigation stalled. Without Building E, we just had an illegal chemical storage operation with some unusual but not impossible paperwork irregularities. The mysterious barrels were sealed with an unknown proprietary method, but that wasn't illegal. The shadow employees were victims of identity theft, even though we couldn't prove how their identities were being used. Noah Carter, the contractor who'd been inspecting the facility, was released with a warning. He stopped receiving payments the day we discovered the operation. The bank had no record of where the deposits had come from. Meridian Holdings denied any involvement and threatened to sue for defamation if we pursued the connection. But Noah didn't leave town immediately. He came to see me a week later, looking haggard and confused. "I can't stop thinking about it," he said. "Those 3 years of inspections. I remember them clearly, but they feel like dreams now. Like something I did while sleepwalking. And sometimes when I close my eyes, I can still see those barrels, still feel the weight of that clipboard in my hand." He showed me his hands. There were chemical burns on them, healed but scarred, in patterns that matched the handling of industrial solvents. But according to his medical records, he'd never had any such injuries. "I think," he said quietly, "I really was working there. Just not in this version of reality." The facility was sealed again, this time with federal locks and 24-hour surveillance. But the cameras keep malfunctioning. Guards report seeing lights in buildings that should be empty. And every month, without fail, someone calls in a safety inspection that no one authorized. I started my own investigation, unofficial and off the books. I found patterns in the city records, anomalies that suggested Building E's influence extended far beyond the warehouse district. Permits filed for buildings that didn't exist, utility bills for addresses that were empty lots, tax records for businesses that operated in spaces that couldn't be found. I mapped these anomalies and found they formed a pattern. A complex geometric shape that hurt to visualize, centered on the Excelsior facility. It was like looking at the footprint of something vast and multidimensional pressing against our reality, leaving impressions that didn't quite make sense in 3 dimensions. I still have the photos I took in Building E, but they show nothing. Just darkness and distortion, like trying to photograph a dream. Brianna and I never talk about what we saw down there. The FBI agents were transferred, and their reports were classified beyond my clearance level. But I know it's still happening. The maintenance, the repairs, the constant work to keep our reality from collapsing into paradox. Sometimes, late at night, I get emails from addresses that shouldn't exist, thanking me for my discretion, updating me on the repair progress, warning me about new weak points forming in other cities. The emails arrive in my inbox, but leave no trace in my email client's memory. I can read them, but I can't forward them, can't print them, can't even copy the text. They exist only in the moment of reading, then fade like dreams upon waking. But I remember them. I remember every word. Last week, I got a package with no return address. Inside was a single barrel, miniature, about the size of a coffee mug. The label read, "Concentrated Possibility, Handle with Imagination." When I opened it, it was empty, but the emptiness had weight, texture, presence. I could feel potential radiating from it, unused futures and discarded pasts swirling in the void. There was also a note, written in handwriting that changed styles mid-sentence, a gift from the spaces between. May it remind you that nothing is as solid as it seems, and everything is more maintained than you know. I keep it on my desk now, a reminder that our reality is more fragile and more maintained than we ever suspected. Every morning, I check the news for stories about abandoned facilities being discovered, about impossible chemicals, about people existing in two places at once. So far, nothing. The custodians are good at their job, but I've started noticing things. Inconsistencies. A street that's sometimes there and sometimes not. People I swear I've seen before but who have no memory of me. News stories that change slightly each time I read them. Small repairs in the fabric of reality. Patches where something was removed or something was added to keep the whole thing from unraveling. Last month, I investigated a missing person case that turned out to be connected to all of this. Maria Gonzalez, a local accountant, had disappeared from her office in the middle of the day. Security footage showed her walking into a supply closet and never coming out. The closet had no other exit, no windows, nowhere she could have gone. But when I checked the Excelsior employee records I'd kept copies of, I found her name. She'd been added to the roster 3 days before she disappeared. According to the records, she was now working the day shift in Building D, handling invoices for chemical shipments that couldn't exist. I found Maria 3 weeks later, working at her regular job, with no memory of being missing. Her co-workers insisted she'd never been gone. The security footage now showed nothing unusual, but she had a strange scar on her hand, shaped like a chemical burn that she couldn't explain. "I have these dreams," she told me when I interviewed her. "Dreams where I'm somewhere else, doing something else. Working in a warehouse, handling papers that glow, talking to people who aren't quite people, but they're just dreams, right?" I didn't tell her about finding her name in the Excelsior records. I didn't tell her that for 3 weeks she'd existed in 2 places at once. I didn't tell her that the dreams weren't dreams, but memories from a parallel self that had been created and then reabsorbed. The warehouse district in Harrisonville is being redeveloped now. They're tearing down the old buildings, putting up condos and shopping centers. But Building C remains. They can't demolish it. Every time they try, the equipment fails. The workers get confused, forgetting what they're supposed to be doing. The paperwork gets lost, reappears with different dates, different signatures. It's protected, though no one knows by what or why. The city works around it, pretending it doesn't exist. The new development plans show a park where Building C stands, as if reality itself is editing out the inconsistency. I drive by sometimes just to check. The fence is always locked, the surveillance camera's always watching. But I see things the cameras don't record. Shadows moving in windows that should be boarded up. trucks that arrive empty and leave full. People who look exactly like people I know, but who move with the wrong rhythm, speak with the wrong cadence, exist with the wrong topology. Last week, I saw myself. He was entering Building C with a clipboard, wearing clothes I don't own, walking with a purposefulness I didn't recognize. When he turned and saw me watching from my car, he smiled and waved. Not surprised, not concerned, just a casual acknowledgement between two versions of the same person. I haven't told anyone about that. Not Brianna, not the captain, not even the mysterious correspondents who email me from addresses that don't exist. Some things are too much even for those who know the truth. They wave when they see me. A professional courtesy between those who know the truth and those who maintain it. I wave back, then drive away, returning to my normal life, my normal cases, my normal reality that's anything but normal once you know what holds it together. The investigation into Excelsior Chemical Storage Incorporated is officially closed, filed away as an unusual but ultimately mundane case of illegal dumping and identity theft. But I keep my own files, my own records, my own documentation of the impossible. Not because I think anyone will believe it, but because someone should remember. Someone should know that our reality has custodians, that existence requires maintenance, that somewhere beneath Harrisonville and probably beneath 1,000 other cities, beings from the spaces between spaces work tirelessly to keep our world from dissolving into paradox. 6 months have passed since we found Building E. Since then, I've noticed more anomalies, more signs of repair and maintenance. A murder case where the victim was alive in another state at the time of death. A theft where the stolen goods existed in 2 places simultaneously until we observed them. A missing person who was found in 3 different locations, all of them real, all of them the right person. Each time, the inconsistency resolves itself. Papers get misfiled, evidence disappears, witnesses forget what they saw. Reality edits itself back to consistency, and only those of us who've seen behind the curtain notice the seams. Brianna quit the force last month. Said she couldn't handle not knowing what was real anymore. She moved to a small town in Montana, as far from any industrial area as she could get. But she called me last week. There's an old mining facility near her new home. It's been abandoned for 50 years, but she's seen lights, heard machinery, noticed people who shouldn't be there. It's happening there too, she said. They're everywhere, aren't they? The custodians? I told her what the shadow Sarah Kim told me. Every reality has weak points, and every weak point needs maintenance. So, what do we do? She asked. Nothing, I said. We do nothing. We let them work. We pretend we don't see. We maintain the illusion that reality is solid and stable and doesn't need constant repair. But that's not entirely true. We do something. We remember. We bear witness. We carry the knowledge that our world is more fragile and more protected than anyone realizes. It's a burden, but also a strange comfort. Knowing that when reality breaks, someone is there to fix it. Knowing that the impossible chemicals in Building C are keeping something worse from leaking into our world. Knowing that the shadow employees who don't exist are doing work that must be done. I got promoted last month, detective sergeant now, with my own team, my own cases. The chief thinks I showed excellent judgment in handling the Excelsior situation, managing to resolve it without causing panic or attracting too much federal attention. He doesn't know about Building E, about the custodians, about the true nature of what we found. But sometimes, when we're working late and the station is quiet, he'll mention something odd. A case that doesn't quite add up. A witness who was in 2 places at once. Evidence that changed when no one was looking. And he'll give me a look that says, maybe, just maybe, he knows more than he lets on. Chief Rodriguez called me into his office last week. He had a file on his desk, old, weathered, marked with classification stamps I didn't recognize. "My predecessor left this for me," he said. "Told me I'd know when to share it." It's about an incident in 1978. A patrol officer named William Harrison reported finding a building that didn't exist at the old Excelsior site. The file contained a report almost identical to ours. The same impossible chemicals, the same shadow employees, the same Building E that existed until observed and then didn't. Officer Harrison had seen the custodians, had been told about the maintenance, had been warned not to report it. He did anyway, the chief continued. Filed a full report, tried to bring in the media, make it public. Within a week, he didn't exist. No record of him at the department, no social security number, no birth certificate. His own family didn't remember him. The only reason we know he existed is this file, and even that seems to be fading. I looked at the file. The text was indeed fading, becoming harder to read even as I watched. In a few more years, maybe months, it would be blank paper. "So you know," I said, "about Building E, about the custodians, about all of it." "I know enough," he replied. "Enough to know that some things need to remain hidden. Enough to know that you did the right thing by not pushing this further. Enough to know that we're all part of the maintenance now, whether we chose it or not. There's a network of us now. People who've seen behind the veil, who know about the maintenance. We don't meet, don't communicate directly, but we recognize each other. A look, a word, a careful question that probes without revealing. We're the ones who smooth over the inconsistencies, who file the reports that make sense even when the truth doesn't, who help maintain the illusion that reality is stable. Because that's our job now. Not just as cops, but as people who know the truth. We're part of the maintenance too, in our own small way. We keep the knowledge contained, keep the panic at bay, keep the world turning smoothly, while the real work happens in places that don't exactly exist. The Excelsior facility still stands, Building C still locked and monitored. But I know it's not empty. I know the barrels are still there, holding back chaos, storing impossibilities, maintaining the chemical balance of existence. And I know that somewhere, in a Building E that exists only when it needs to, the custodians continue their work. Last week, I found another miniature barrel on my desk. This one was labeled Temporal Stabilizer, Apply to Paradoxes. Inside was what looked like liquid time, flowing backward and forward simultaneously. I don't know what it means, but I keep it with the first one. My collection of impossible things, proof that our reality is stranger and more fragile than we ever imagined. Noah Carter, the contractor, still emails me sometimes. He says he's found similar facilities in other cities, places that shouldn't exist. When the time comes, and you'll know when, you'll need to make a choice. To let reality continue its current path toward eventual collapse, or to help us implement a solution that will fundamentally change what it means to exist in this dimension. Before I could ask what she meant, she was gone. Not departed, just no longer there, as if she had never been there at all. The city is planning to build a new police station next year. The proposed site is an old industrial area on the north side. I've driven through it, and I recognize the signs. The too perfect decay. The shadows that move wrong. The feeling that space isn't quite configured correctly. It's another weak point. Another place where reality needs reinforcement. I've quietly suggested a different location. Made up some concerns about soil contamination, traffic patterns, anything to keep them from building there. Because I know what they'd find if they dug too deep. Another Building E, another team of custodians, another glimpse behind the veil of reality. It's my job now, my real job. not investigating crimes, but protecting the mystery, keeping people from looking too closely at the places where reality is thin, maintaining the maintenance by ensuring no one interferes with it. Brianna called again yesterday. She's seen more things in Montana, more signs of the custodians at work. She's thinking about coming back, joining me in this strange new role we've found ourselves in. Guardians of the guardians, protectors of the protectors, the thin blue line between humanity and the truth about their reality. "Do you ever wonder," she asked, "if we're part of the plan? If we were meant to find Building E, meant to learn the truth, meant to become part of the system, I don't know. Maybe we're accidents, glitches in the system that the custodians are too polite to correct. Or maybe she's right, and we're exactly where we're supposed to be, doing exactly what we're supposed to do." The warehouse district in Harrisonville continues its transformation. New buildings rise where old ones fell. Fresh paint covers decades of rust. Life returns to places that had been forgotten. But Building C remains, surrounded by progress but untouched by it. A monument to the impossible, a reminder that some things can't be developed away. And beneath it, in a Building E that exists when it needs to, the custodians continue their work, maintaining the chemical balance of reality, storing impossibilities, preventing paradoxes, keeping our fragile world from collapsing into chaos. I drive by every week now, just to check, just to make sure it's still there, still locked, still protecting us from truths we're not ready to know. Sometimes I see Noah Carter there, taking readings with instruments that shouldn't exist. Sometimes I see the shadow employees, arriving for shifts in a building that's not on any blueprint. Sometimes I see nothing at all, which is perhaps the most unsettling sight of all. But I always see the barrels through the window of Building C. Those impossible containers holding impossible chemicals, maintaining the impossible balance that keeps our possible world intact. They're beautiful in their wrongness, perfect in their impossibility, essential in their non-existence. This is my report, the real one, the one that will never be filed. The truth about the Excelsior Chemical Storage Facility and the infrastructure of reality itself. The story of how a routine investigation into illegal dumping became a glimpse into the machinery of existence. I'll keep investigating normal crimes, filing normal reports, maintaining the normal facade of normal life. But I know the truth now. Reality is a construction, constantly maintained, constantly repaired, constantly protected from its own inherent instability. And somewhere, in the spaces between spaces, the custodians work on, checking gauges that measure concepts, adjusting flows of liquid possibility, storing away the paradoxes that would unravel everything if released. They're the true heroes, the ones whose story will never be told, whose work will never be acknowledged, whose existence can never be proven.